Here's the thing that everybody should do if they want to get rich, but nobody wants to listen to, which is fascinating to me, is that amateurs do lots of things and pros do the few right things. And how is that possible? It's because pros teach other amateurs how to do all of those little things that they don't need to do. And so they have leverage, right? So pros don't have to be busy. Amateurs do have to be busy because they can't differentiate what is right and effective yet. So I think there's this portion of your life where you have to do incredible amounts of hard work because you can't delineate what is good versus what is busy work. And every one of us just needs to realize that at some point. And the only way you start to realize what is good versus busy work is through skill acquisition, one of the skills of which is what is effective versus what is just filler. And so, you don't even have to pick up numerous skills. You can be like what Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett talk about, which is making 3 to 5 really high signal to noise bets over your entire career and sitting lazily on your asses for the rest of the time. I mean, Munger talks about all the time that, in fact, their strategy is only one thing, which is when they see big risk, they go in huge if they think that risk can be rewarded, and they do not go in if they do not see a huge risk reward. So they just are professional no-sayers. And that's because they learn to differentiate the difference between busy work and good work. And I think that is where most people should strive. Can you strive to actually determine what actions to take that will make movements or change? And it's really, really easy to say, but hard to do. I mean, think about it in your business. In my business, every single day, there's a to-do list so big, I will never, ever finish it. And I have to determine every single day, what is the one thing that if I do, it becomes the fulcrum on which I get to place a lever that moves a giant boulder. And if I can't continuously get closer to that one thing, the business will fail. And I think that's how most of us are, is we have to be able to figure out, what does a fulcrum look like? What does a lever look like? And what do just a bunch of pebbles look like that are going to do nothing for me? And that's actually quite hard.
Okay, skill acquisition matters a lot.
Yeah.
Getting that leverage matters a lot. We've painted a dark picture about where we're going, but I don't think either of us are afraid. Paranoid, yes. Because only the paranoid survive. But
True.
when I say I'm paranoid, what I mean is I'm trying to see the angles.
Yeah.
I'm not taking that it's going to happen easily for granted.
Yeah.
So my channel can be rightly accused of quote unquote doom and gloom, but I'll just blame all of you motherfuckers because that's all you click on in a headline. But what I hold myself accountable to is every word out of my mouth is something I actually believe. So I believe all the things that I'm saying. I just don't have crippling fear. The only thing that maybe unnerves me, even though I'm a huge proponent of it, is AI. We'll get to that later.
Yeah.
So anyway, potentially quote unquote dark period coming from a recession standpoint. I say dark because a lot of people who aren't paranoid, who either don't have the intellect or have not put the time in or just don't have the right set of ideas, whatever, they're going to get blindsided. I love too many of those people. So it does appear as a dark time to me.
Yeah.
However, you have a quote from Baron Rothschild that I think bears bringing up.
Yeah. Buy when there's blood in the streets, even if the blood is your own, maybe especially when it's your own. And he became a titan of industry, probably one of the richest men ever on an inflation-adjusted basis. So I think he did okay. And, I was thinking, I pulled some data for us for this conversation today, because here's the thing. If you haven't been through a recession yet, you're going to survive this next one too. I mean, if you look historically, and we can show this graph too, we survived 90, 99, 2020, 2008. Those were just the recessions during my working years. And if you look at what happened after all of those recessionary periods, not all of them bounced back in a V-shaped recovery, but all of them have bounced back. And so the best predictor of the future is the past. It's not perfect, but it's likely that we will continue to survive as a country and as individuals, just like we have historically. And so I think even though it's scary out there, realizing a sale is coming can also be really, really powerful.
What do you mean sale?
When the market goes down, everything becomes cheaper. You're already seeing that. Austin's one of the worst hit real estate cities in the country. So if you're looking to buy real estate in a market that has Tesla moving to it, that has Dell, that has a bunch of Google headquarters moving to it, a bunch of Facebook employees moving to it, a bunch of AI. It's like one of the defense AI centers of the country, but it's, the average house in Austin's down somewhere between 20 to 30%.
Wow.
And so what does that mean? Well, interest rates are coming down and houses are 20 to 30% cheaper. And so you can buy a house for less money at less interest rates than you could a year ago. And probably your pay hasn't gone down by 20 to 30%. And so in this market, you're going to have a bunch of opportunities to buy things at sale. And most people get their money. I sort of think about it like the unprepared transfer their money to the prepared during downturns. And so if you do not listen to channels that are doom and gloom about what might come, then when it comes, 1, you won't recognize it, 2, you won't act on it, and 3, you will actually lose from it because somebody else will take advantage of your panic. And so one of my biggest missions is just getting people to see the pattern, because once you see, oh, look, this happened in 2008, it happened in 2020, it happened in 99, it happened in 90, and by the way, there's signals right now that show the same thing, well, then you might be prepared for what's coming. And it might not scare you when you see that, auto loans are at the highest level since the last recession, auto loan defaults, that you might not see that credit card delinquencies are at all-time highs. And that might not scare you. You might instead go, okay, well, something's coming on sale. So how can I make sure I have enough cash to do something with? How can I circle up a couple friends so we can make a smart investment in property during this period? Because the other thing that's interesting, those big scary people we talk about all the time, BlackRock, Blackstone, all the big companies, they get a credit crunch too. They cannot get as much access to capital as they can during normal markets. So that's another one. There's very few times where the poor get to steal from the rich. And one of them is in a downturn if the poor are actually thoughtful enough about preparing for it. And you can't do it in a big way, but most of America will die broke, alone, and fat. And so if that's the case, one smart house acquisition, one smart multifamily acquisition is enough to set up a family for generations. And it's just continuing to take those small steps in a period where most people are acting emotionally.
Walk us through. So you are, I've heard you speak to people before, like this is the time. You need to be ready, as you were just saying, but you also need to act. So what is your very unique BRRT strategy for not only getting through a recession, but really taking advantage of it?
Yeah. So we have a strategy about how to buy businesses during a recession. And we talk about you buy a recession-resistant business. So think a plumbing company, a landscaping company, a company that you work in. You could even buy part of it during a down period where maybe your boss needs a little bit of capital or your boss needs you to go out and bring in more clients for them. And you do that in a recession-resistant sector. You raise prices because most small businesses are underpriced somewhere from 30 to 300%. And you add technology. And this generation in particular, like if you are young and hungry, you are 10 to 20 to 100x more tech competent than the average small business owner. And so your ability to work alongside one or take over a small business and add technology that makes things cheaper, faster, better is probably quite high. I mean, in fact, I was with this cleaning company this week that we might invest into, and all these guys did, they're window cleaning. They're a window cleaning company. They went from unemployed, laid off during COVID from pretty good jobs, and no money, trying to figure life out. Their first year in business in a window cleaning company, they did $200,000 in revenue. The next year, they did $500,000 in revenue. This year, they'll do somewhere between $700,000 and $1 million in revenue. And these are two kids that are both sub 28 years old, one with a newborn baby on the way. And how did they do it? They added incredible social media marketing. So they do really funky videos. They added really incredible branding and merchandising because can you name one window cleaning company? Of course not. Nobody can. So how could you, as a young person, get on board with a business that's very simple, but hasn't been sexed up by the internet and hasn't been sexed up by adding technology? And I think those are all around. It's just on the internet, I think people look down on those types of businesses because we were told for so long, let's go become a doctor, a lawyer, let's go to school, let's go to college. What if you're actually happier with a little dirt under your fingernails in a company that you own, where you get to get out of your house occasionally, away from a screen, and get to know your neighbors and your community? Turns out you might be happier than working at McKinsey or Bain for 60 hours a week under somebody else's thumb. And that is something that not enough young people, I think, know yet.
It's really interesting. I think you've got your finger on something that is going to be a cultural shift of massive proportions. I had a friend over last night, shout out to Dean, who was walking me through his new thesis. So he's done everything from helping finance films, creative producing, to SPACs, to traditional investing. I mean, just all over the place. And he was like, hey, I've got a new thesis. And he was like, we're going through this really interesting transitional time. You're going to have a ton of baby boomers retiring, but they're not going to have anyone to pass their business on to. You've got a lot of people frustrated. This is going to start to sound familiar here. Working traditional jobs. They don't want to be in investment banking. And so the new play is going to be skip college, buy a business. And I said, my friend, I have somebody you need to talk to. But I imagine a lot of people listening to this, if they're new to your world, that is going to sound ridiculous, especially in a time where we're going into a recession. So if they don't have access to money, they've never bought a business, never run a business, why would this be a good idea? How do you, for a second, just you're here to persuade, you're here to help make that revolution actually come true. What do you tell people?
First, I say, don't do it if you don't like pain, because owning a small business is painful.
Owning any business is painful.
Owning any business is painful. And there will be nights that you will regret it. But here's the flip side. The second that somebody tells you you shouldn't do it, and yet they are an owner or they run their own business, you ask them, why didn't you go back to being an employee for somebody else? And they won't have a good answer. They'll say, well, I'm unemployable. Well, I had no other choice. And the best, don't listen to what people say, listen to what people do. And what people do is when they get a taste of freedom, they either want to partner with other people on more deals and businesses, or they want to work for companies that they're obsessed with. They don't want to have to work for companies that they don't like doing things that they don't want to do for money anymore. And so I will say it's painful, but it is worth it. And that for most people, running a small business is not rocket science, especially today. I think it's never been easier to start a small business. As evidenced by the amount of businesses that have been started, somewhere between like 2 to 5x the number of businesses that were created over the last 3 years as the past 10 years. And that's just determined by like LLC and entity creation. But it's never been harder to have a profitable business. So most small businesses, 90% of them never even hit the $1 million mark. And so with that out there, I've always had this idea of, well, it's really hard to figure out product market fit in a small business, right? Like most businesses, somewhere between 30 to 40% of them die because they couldn't find product market fit. Just they had an idea and nobody wanted their idea, right? And so I'm kind of like that. I don't know that I have a crazy idea that somebody's going to want to buy. I never had that. And so instead I'm like, why don't I just buy a couple of these small businesses and I can partner with the founder of the small business. And I know that somebody already wants it because they have revenue and it's profitable and I could just help it grow. And so we see that again and again and again, but nobody taught us this in school because there's risk, right? When you go and get a job at McKinsey or Bain, there's no risk of you losing money. You know, they're going to pay you a salary, which is largely guaranteed unless you get fired. And yet when you go and buy a small business, you could lose money and you could not make money and you could owe money from debt. And so I think people are so scared of that. They're terrified of failing. And my point is like the US actually has an incredible system called bankruptcy, which a lot of countries don't have. This is an ability for you to wipe the slate if a business doesn't work out for you. Well, what's the best time to wipe the slate? When you really don't have anything anyway. So when you're young and you don't have a lot going on, I don't know why you wouldn't take a huge risk and try to buy into a business, try to earn into a business because you're a general contractor and you work in a construction business and you can't progress any further in the construction business. So you go to a competitor that you realize is 65 years old plus and you say to him, hey, what are you doing with your business? Are you going to sell it at some point? Are you going to run it forever? Are you going to give it to your son? No, you're not. Well, maybe somebody like me could buy into part of your business and I could earn into it using the profits and pay you out over time. Like, would you ever consider something like that? And it turns out small business owners don't have other options if they're under $10 million in revenue for the most part. And so there's a lot of these small businesses that will just close as opposed to get transferred. And I think, by now we've taught, 5,000-6,000 people how to buy businesses across our courses and in our mastermind. And they bought something like $262 million in revenue.
Wow.
Yeah. And these are people who are like former teachers, engineers. They're doing seller financing. They're doing SBA loans. And what I've realized, I can almost tell immediately if somebody will be successful at it or not, like if they'll buy a business or not. And the way I can tell if they will be successful or not is, do they complain about how much work it is? And if they say, this is a lot of work, I just kind of want the deal to fall in my lap, you're probably not going to be successful buying a business. The ones that say that they're willing to do the work, it's fascinating. I haven't seen one of them go sideways yet. We've seen 3 people's deals go sideways, and all of those were because they didn't want to keep working on the business. And so I think hard work is really an underrated thing in a society that wants nobody to work and everybody to take.
Do you have a mental model for why that is?
Why everybody wants that these days?
Not necessarily why they want it, though. Maybe that's part of the answer, but why I think you're rounding hard work to something.
Yeah.
I don't think you literally just mean work hard, but since we've already gone into detail on that, so whatever that thing is that you're rounding it to, do you have a mental model for why that's so important?
I see what you mean. Well, one of my favorite questions to ask when I interview people is, when was the last time you worked all night on something by your choice? And what was it? What did you do?
Literally for me?
Well, yeah, for you. I know what it was for you, though, I bet.
The last time I worked through the night, it's a good question. I think that was for the comics. That was the last time because we had a deadline to pitch.
Yeah.
And so I had to hit that deadline.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was the last time it was through the night.
And what would be a fun thing is there are many people, I bet, listening to this that would say, I have never worked through the night for something. I've never wanted something so bad that I was willing to sacrifice sleep for one night, which, like, Brian Johnson is not going to like. He wants us to sleep, which I get it from a health perspective. But there is such a joy in working on something that is really hard but really fun. And, my husband is former military and a Navy SEAL. And when I look at his relationships, I'm in awe of them. His friendships from that time, they've become my best friends. They stay with us. We stay with them. We're great. We're godparents to his kids. We have this tight-knit community that's almost impossible to break. If I needed to bury a body, they would just ask me the coordinates and they would be there. And the reason that he has that is because they went through something really hard together. And people wonder why the youth, I read this quote the other day, the youth today, especially young women, sub 30, say that not a single person really knows them. Not one single person. We have a crisis of friendship and family in the U.S. and faith, lowest levels of that across the board. And I was talking to Arthur Brooks the other day, who just wrote a book with Oprah, who's one of, I think, the great thinkers on happiness.
Oprah or Arthur?
Arthur. And Arthur said there's 4 things that determine happiness, and that is faith, family, friendships, meaningful friendships, and work that serves. And he's like, we've done decades of research on this at both Harvard and at AEI, where he was previously. And he's like, and so it's no surprise that people are more unhappy than they've ever been because they feel more disconnected than they ever have because they have no purpose in their life and nobody to share it with.
All right. So that was a response to me asking, the thing you call hard work is the underappreciated thing. And we ended up talking about faith and family and friendship. That's really interesting. So I'm going to see if I can tease apart the way that you think.
Yeah.
Okay. So part of this is you have a base assumption that working hard is in and of itself, if tied to a thing that you love, is the reward in and of itself.
Yeah.
Is it love first, hard work second, or is hard work in your mind an inescapable need?
That's a good question. I know this, that everyone has had a moment where they're so miserable working on the thing that they're working on that they almost can't stand it any longer. They just want to quit. They do quit. They make irrational decisions because their misery gauge at work is so high. And I've felt that before. And if I go back and think about why did that hard work not make me happy? What was the root cause of that? I think it is at the moment in which you feel like you have nothing else that you're learning. So I coordinate hard work with learning. I'm usually learning something if I'm working hard at something. I coordinate that with working on something that matters. So if I've lost my why for why I'm working. And then lastly, if I'm working with people that I don't aspire to be or don't want to be around. So it's sort of this like people, purpose, and this learning component that if I have those three things, the hard work is really fun. But if I don't have those three things, then perhaps the hard work feels futile, unnecessary, and more like labor than work.
I'll be curious to hear if this resonates with you. There's a spiritual component to your mission to get people to consider buying small businesses that now I've always known that was true, but I didn't know why it was true. Now teasing that stuff out. So some of this is an aspect of a life well lived for you.
Yeah, I think that's true. Like, did you ever work in a cubicle?
Yes.
Yeah. Did you work in a cubicle when you didn't work for yourself?
Yes.
Have you seen the Tucker Carlson response to, postmodernist architecture?
But I've seen the headlines. Now you make me wish that I had clicked.
It's beautiful. I can send you the clip afterwards if people are curious. But basically, he's in an interview with somebody, can't remember. And he says, postmodernist architecture is I'm going to simplify.
It's like meant to suck your soul out.
Yeah, it's basically like it's meant to demise humanity. You know, postmodernism is a direct affront to humanity. It wants to suck the human out of us. And how he ends it is he basically says, and no privacy at all. And then he says very intensely, it is because they do not value you. They do not value you as a human. You are a number, nothing else to them. And that is why postmodernists and cubicles demoralize humans, because they are showing you with their actions that you mean nothing. You mean nothing to them. And when I watched that, I thought, God, as a creator of things, which is how I think about building and what we do here too, everything that I put my name on is like a little piece of me, right? The things that I'm creating with my hands, there's a reason that I'm doing it. I only have so many seconds and minutes and hours in my life. In fact, we have very few of them. And so why would we put our workers in these instances that show that we don't care about them at all? That it's like copy, repeat, copy, repeat, copy, repeat. And I'm a capitalist, so I understand the idea of profits and losses and needing to be capital efficient. But I also really believe in humans, and I believe in our ability to elevate one another. And that if I find Tom in his zone of genius, in a place that has power for Tom, I believe in the power of place, then I will have a Tom that outperforms on an incredible level. And I don't mean distractions, which is where I think Google and all of them got it wrong. Foosball and nap chairs and whatever. We don't need to be children that when we stop working, we have to go play around with something else in order to distract ourselves from our work. We don't need that. But we do need to see beauty around us because we're capable of it, and why wouldn't we? And so I think you're right. There is part of this that I think is almost spiritual and the place where I found the most flow state, just like athletes do when they do their craft. I find the same thing when I'm caught in work that means something. And I think for people to say you should have work-life balance, you should not work all the time, that is bad for your mental health. It's like, what the fuck do you know about what flow is? Is flow Netflixing and drinking on Friday evenings? Because it doesn't have to be. But if that's for you, let it be you, and I'll do me.
Yeah, that's not flow. Flow, I will say, has a definition, but that won't be met by that. Anyway, probably not the important part of that. the spirituality. So I can feel you trying to make the world a better place, which I love. It is very much why I do what I do. As I said earlier, I think we are in a battle for ideas.
Yeah.
One of the ideas, so everything is downstream of ideas. So they grip us at the individual level, they grip people at the collective level. And so it really matters what we push and promote. You have a very unique stance on, hey, there's a thing that you're probably not thinking about that's not currently in the zeitgeist as the cool thing to buy the boring business, the gateway business that will make you realize that these are being run by people no smarter than you, to sort of co-opt the Steve Jobs quote. I think that's really important. And I think that marrying that back to your message is going to be really important so that people understand, hey, me, Codie Sanchez, I'm trying to reach out into your soul and help you find that path to the thing that you secretly want, which I, Tom Bilyeu, will round to fulfillment. I think that's what everybody wants. And so I have a mental framework for why hard work is so important. I think we have an evolutionary algorithm that runs in our mind that absolutely mandates that we work hard, and that nature only has two levers, pleasure and pain. Nature, over God knows how many hundreds of thousands, millions of years, has been shaping us from amoeba to now, saying, surviving is going to be hard, and my job as nature is to keep you alive long enough to have kids that have kids. So there are going to be certain things that I'm going to incentivize. And if you get a tremendous dopamine rush or whatever, when you work really hard and make progress towards a goal, now all of a sudden you're going to want to do that. Because, man, have you ever watched the TV show Alone?
No.
I need to start getting a kickback from Amazon, who I think hosts the show. I talk about this so much. That gives a real glimpse into what all of humanity was like until 1,000 years ago. I mean, it is hysterical how hard it is to stay alive, to just find enough calories to live. Yeah. It's bananas. You don't have to go, I read so much history. You don't have to go much more than 100 years back in time to hear where it was like, oh, we were just trying to get from here to Oregon, and we were suddenly eating slugs. Oh, and then we ran out of those. And so we had to eat each other as we died. It's like, yo. So
we all played that game, didn't we?
Yeah. Oregon Trail. So life is a level of hard that we don't understand. So evolution had to make doing hard things internally rewarding so that we just have this algorithm that says, oh, you worked really hard. Well done. Good on you. And if you aren't working hard, it's going to feel wrong. That's part one. Part two is entropy. And if I could come up with a simpler word, but that really is the right word, meaning that all things are fighting against you. If you want to jump high, gravity yanks you back down. If you want to start a business, other people are going to start a similar business. If you're doing well, people are going to copy you. One of my favorite stories from our time at Quest. So when we launched Quest, we looked ridiculous compared to all the other companies in the health and nutrition space. They all looked what we call veins and chains. So it was all aimed at bodybuilders. Nobody was using food porn. It was just all tough guys, big muscles, veins bulging, literally chains draped around their neck, red and black. I mean, taking a page out of Hitler's playbook, which if you've never read Mein Kampf, I'm really doubling up on my learning from the Psychopaths day here. But he just lays out oh, this has a certain psychological reaction. So we're going to be everything that's not. We're going to be blue because it piques creativity. We're going to be food porn. We want to feel welcoming and inviting. And we did so well 3 years later. I walked to somebody else's booth at a trade show because I thought it was ours. And I was like, these motherfuckers, they've literally just copied everything that we're doing.
Yep.
So anyway, you get everything is fighting against you. And if you don't get real pleasure out of working hard, you just won't ever be able to overcome entropy. It will, there are just so many things fighting against you. And so to be able to run a business is really what you've said, hard work, and what I call the physics of progress, which is just, it's iteration. It's very important that you do the steps, but if you can work hard and run the physics of progress, you really can pull this off. But I think people need to contextualize, oh, this is a spiritual journey. I'm doing this as somebody who's pursuing fulfillment. I'm doing this as somebody who looks out at this particular moment, which I certainly do, I think you share. And we're at a tipping point for the wrong ideas taking a hold of people. And so we're talking about business, recession, et cetera, but this is really about what ideas should win and hard work. Recognizing you can buy a business if you so choose. If autonomy is a major driver for you, it could be a real path out. But I think if people just hear the cha-ching of the cash register and they don't understand that you're speaking to their soul as much as you're speaking to their pocketbook, they'll get lost.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the best books of all time for that is Atlas Shrugged, which has had some political connotation, which I don't know why, because it really is about this idea of the joy in finding the thing that you are uniquely built to create on this planet. And, there's one quote I love from it that's, to summarize, it's basically like, what a tragedy to let your spark go out, spark by irreplaceable spark in the shadows of the could-bes, the what-ifs, the maybes.
If you run a small business and your goal is to stay competitive and grow effectively in 2024, then you need to make sure you have a killer CRM, one that allows you to connect with your customers' needs like never before. HubSpot's Starter CRM Suite provides your small business with the essential tools, education, and support you need to grow efficiently. Attract new customers, automate your outreach, save time, and connect better with your customers with HubSpot, the most powerful and easy to use customer relationship management software. With integrated marketing, sales, and customer service tools, you have everything you need to efficiently build your business in no time. Find out why over 200,000 customers from more than 130 countries trust HubSpot to bring their team, tools, and data together all in one place. And that includes the Impact Theory team, by the way. Click the link below to try HubSpot for free today.
And that always stuck with me, of this idea of, man, at the end of the day, I hope I show up at the pearly gates, wrung dry, saying to God, I had not one drop left, which was a paraphrase from an Emma Bombeck quote that is one of the quotes I go back to a lot, which is like, what else is in there? Like, having this curiosity for yourself about what else are you capable of doing is so powerful. Every time I was just at lunch with one of my team members and my husband, and we were talking about, what was the hardest thing you've ever done? Like, the hardest thing you've ever done. Think about like one instance. And, we talked first physically. And so I remember one of mine, it was like hiking a mountain. I was super miserable. It was blizzarding. It was a very high mountain. There were crevasses, whatever. And it turns out I don't like hiking. I don't like the cold, and I don't like heights. Right. And so it was just like, it was miserable. You had to poop in a bag. It was just like not fun, multiple days.
You lost me at pooping in a bag, I'm afraid.
But I'm glad I did it, because I need to have more of those hard moments to realize how lucky we have it in life. And I do think we're kind of, as humans, we kind of forget how lucky we have it. We have such short-term memory to history, which we do not study enough, and even to our own history, remembering what we've been through before and thus are probably capable of doing in the future. But I remember we have a company called Main Street Holding Company where we own all of our small businesses, and that's where we buy other people's businesses or invest in other people's businesses. And, I remember almost every single one of those businesses at some point having a moment where I thought we were going to lose everything. I remember one company approachment where, we got all of our money stolen from a guy that we thought we were best buds with, and then was like kind of public about it and how much that hurt. I remember when we had our first car wash deals go through and we thought we were going to sell for a huge amount of money, and then the whole thing fell through. And then, we almost didn't have the grit to like keep going. We were so close to the finish line. It's like seeing the marathon right in front of you end. And then all of a sudden they're like, just kidding, 10 more miles, and we weren't ready for that. And so I remember all of those hard moments. And I think those build you up and enable you to kind of keep going. And you build up these calluses, right? It's just like weights at the gym. At some point, like you don't feel them as much. And anytime I feel it too much, I go to a book from a great. Like we were talking before, I'm reading Ted Turner's book, Call Me Ted, right now. And it's incredible because he goes through like the things that bother, he goes through his difficulty like it's Tuesday. He's like, well, then we lost $100 million on the games over there. And then he literally says it like that, moves to the next line. And I like rewound it a couple times. And I said to myself, I want to be so big and have created so much wealth and prosperity that I can say, we lost $100 million on that. Think about that. But there's a guy out there who that is the way that he thinks. And then For all those people who are like crunchy granola, hate making money, think the world's going to end, all about climate change, what did he do with his billions? He owns now the biggest bison preserve in the world and has single-handedly brought back almost the level of bisons in his area, which I think is Wyoming. So guess what? Money can do a lot of good too.
No doubt. What is the single hardest thing you've done?
The single hardest thing I ever did was get divorced when I went through that previously. So that was emotionally the hardest thing I've ever done. You make a promise to somebody, you say you're going to be together for life, and then you break that promise. And I tend to try to keep my promises. And so that was really hard for me. And
Did you initiate?
I did. Yeah. And realizing that, when you're young and your prefrontal cortex is not fully developed and you listen to what everybody else says your life should be, as opposed to having your own internal guiding frameworks, creed, vision for life, then it's very easy for somebody else to supersede theirs on top of you. And I think that's what I allowed to happen to me. I superseded my family's on top of me, my mom's, his, and I tried to be a painting that somebody else painted as opposed to my own. And I think that happens to a lot of young people because we don't spend that much time asking ourselves, like, who do we want to be? What do we stand for? What does our name mean? And what do we actually want to work towards? And time would be better spent in universities if we spent more time on that as opposed to amoebas and Pythagorean theorems.
How do you come to know thyself?
I honestly, I don't know another way besides doing things so hard that it feels uncomfortable constantly and then deciding if you want to keep doing those things or not. I've only ever learned about myself through negation. I don't like this because I tried it and that wasn't great. I don't like this because I tried it and that wasn't great. I'm not smart enough to go, I like that and I want to go after that. I kind of have to try all the things and realize I don't like them. And then I sort of ping pong my way to finally something that I think is me. And so I think that's a lot of us too. And it's okay to have varied career paths. It's okay to make a lot of mistakes. You just try to not make ones that are lifetime early. And so, I'm a big proponent of marriage. Being married is the best thing that ever happened to me this go round. And the strongest partner I have by far has ever been Chris in any sense of the word. But I probably wouldn't have made that decision that early without fully knowing myself through having gone through a lot of hard things and realizing what I was willing or not willing to continue.
You've got to get your calendar right. Like if you don't maintain, if your calendar doesn't reflect your actual priorities, you're in real trouble. So I keep a list that I call important things.
Yeah.
And the important things are, what is the most important thing that I could be working on right now? And I will just tell any stage entrepreneur, but certainly beginning stage entrepreneurs, you're going to have trouble prioritizing. And the reason you're going to have trouble prioritizing is because you think you're dumb. But in reality, the problem is no one's good at prioritizing until they've done it a lot. Mm-hmm. And then you begin to get a sense of, okay, this is to quote Tim Ferriss, this is the lead domino. If I do this thing, it'll make everything that comes after it easier. So you'll start to identify those things. And you're going to do those until you can't do them anymore, either from fatigue or there's just nothing more to do. And now you're waiting for somebody to come back to you, whatever. Then you move on to the second thing. But I find everybody gets paralyzed by, I don't know what to put in first place. Mm-hmm. And so now you have 7 things in first place. And so I constantly fight with my team about this. You stop fucking being weak. Like, what's number one? Yeah. Like, you're allowing yourself to be emotionally paralyzed because you're like, oh, it's all important. Yes, motherfucker, but you can only execute on one thing at a time. Yeah. So what's that one thing? And so I'm just ruthless about that. Yeah. So the beginning of my day, so I'm up usually at 4:30 in the morning. I don't let anybody on my schedule until 9 a.m., 9:30 if I can push it. Yep. And then I don't let anybody on my schedule after 1 p.m.
I like that.
So there's a narrow window where I've already gotten 4 to 5 hours worth of work in the beginning. So I'm doing my most important shit, all execution. Then I take meetings, I make sure everybody's moving and they have whatever questions they need answered. And then I'm fucking in it. I'm in product and I'm in marketing. Those are the 2 things I'm just like obsessively focused about. And so I'm available, I'm with the team, which by the way, I'm gonna guess because of how many businesses you own, you don't operate like this. During COVID, I was like, word, go wherever you want. You can move away, no big deal. Now I'm like, motherfucker, you better get in the office. Like we are back in a big way. It is so inefficient. It's to so not have people here.
Yeah. Well, we just bought an office in Austin for the same reason. I've especially found I have an incredible team because they'll tell me, they'll be really honest about it. Like one of the guys on my team who runs part of the creative thing, he's like, yeah, I just don't work as hard when I'm not in the office. I'm like, I can't believe you just said that to my face, but also thank you.
Right.
And I think it's true because all of us have willpower issues, and all of us can benefit from a little eye over the shoulder. And the reason why I think we can really benefit is because I remember when I was at Goldman Sachs and they were watching us like crazy, I was never on social media. I was never dicking off because I wanted to get out of that office. I knew I was going to have to do long hours, and I wanted to get out of there when I was done. I never understood the Silicon Valley foosball, make them stay here all the time thing. I'm like, come here, give it intense, maybe do a workout break or a walk in between, come back to intense, and then go live your life. And if you're like me, you're going to work way more than that, but like be here when you're going to be here. Like think about work like meditation. You should be so singularly focused that all distraction sort of fades away. And if you do that, then you actually have to work less because you're so much more effective. But I remember early on in my career, it's why I couldn't stay at Vanguard actually, because I was sitting at a desk and I was like, those ducks where underneath the surface they're paddling like crazy, but on top they're smooth. That was me. I was drowning. I didn't know anything about finance. I'd come from journalism. Everybody was smarter than me. Everybody went to Harvard and Stanford, et cetera. I went to Arizona State, Harvard of the West, as you said. And I remember one of my teammates came up and was trying to talk to me about lunch planning and stuff. And I was like, Cece, I'm focused. I don't have time to talk about any of this. I'm here, man. We could talk like after work, but like I'm here right now. And that happened like a few times. And I wasn't trying to be a jerk. I just couldn't be distracted because then I lost my focus entirely. And I probably have a little ADHD. And so it would derail me for like 30, 40 minutes. And I remember that happened. And then my boss at one point was like, your team thinks that you would leave dead bodies behind you. And I was like, huh, really? Why? They're like, well, you don't pay attention when they come up to your desk. You don't do party planning. And I was like, guy, I am here to do a job. And I would never like run over somebody to do the job, but I will be singularly focused to get it done. And so that is, I think, what it takes. Have you backed
off that? Or are you, because now as a CEO, I have to imagine, you got to make people feel a little more warm and fuzzy. Or have you found a way to be like, yo?
I have good people who are more warm and fuzzy than I am. So I found in life, like you are who you are, kind of. And every time I try to become somebody that I'm not, first of all, it comes off as inauthentic. And second of all, it doesn't really work. So if I come in and I'm too warm and fuzzy, nobody's going to buy it. I am fun, I think. Like I'm aggressive, but I'm fun. So I'll make jokes. And I do something every Monday called the Compass. And basically it's just a little PowerPoint, 10 minutes that I give to the whole team. And in it are a few things like our culture code. Every single week I go through what the 13 values are. I pick like one person who wins like something for one of our values. And in that there'll be some funky fun stuff for each of them. And so I will cheerlead the shit out of the company during that period. But when somebody needs a hug, they know not to come to me about it for sure. Now, I think the counterpoint to that is I've always taken care of my people. Like, as long as you are good to your teammates and to the company, like, I will have your back. Like, if you need a new job and this isn't the place for you, I will help you find a new job. I won't fire you. Like, I will handhold you. If you have a health issue, I'm going to take care of you. But, like, I don't think you have to be warm and fuzzy. I also hire, like, we're really honest about who we are in interviews, which I think is really, really, and if you... I was a terrible employee at Vanguard because they're super touchy-feely, kind of socialists. And I liked Goldman. I liked capitalist kind of jerks, but they were really smart. And so I liked that. I wanted the pressure. And so now when people come and interview with us, I'm like, hey, like, talk to me about like your favorite moment of pressure. Talk to me about when you did the thing that felt unreasonable to get the goal. And I tell them up front, our interviews start with all the things that are terrible about the company and why I'm awful to work for. And if they still like it after that, then they might be a win. But otherwise, at least they know,
We have a very similar thing. So it's our culture doc. You can't come into interview unless you've read it.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, oh yeah. And the funny thing is, I've had multiple people say, hey, we've lost a lot of candidates when they read the culture doc. And I'm like, that's the point. Because I want them to know who we are. And if you're not about that life, then this is not the place for you. I am trying to win a championship. Nothing short. I'm not trying to be an also ran. I'm not trying to play and get a participation trophy. I'm flat out, I'm trying to beat Disney.
Yeah.
And that is a big task. And the odds of success are very low. And so I want to have fun, but I also want to be surrounded by hardcore motherfuckers that are here to win.
Yeah.
And the document says exactly that.
Oh, I love
and yeah, it is very aggressive. And so, yeah, we have weeded people out. But what I always say to the people saying like, hey, are we sure? Like this thing is really aggressive. I'm like, it found you.
Yeah.
I'm like, what's your favorite thing about this company? The people? Exactly. Like we are a very specific flavor.
Oh, yeah.
And if you like our flavor, I like to think we're like black licorice, which I love. Now, I know for some people that is the most disgusting thing in the universe. And so I'm like, but we're that kind of specific. For the right person, like we will be the favorite place you've ever worked. And for the wrong person, we will be trash. So for any of my entrepreneurs out there, let me tell you right now, culture is one of the most important things. Product market fit, more important.
Yeah, I agree.
Make more money than you spend, more important.
Agree.
But then like culture is going to be a huge deal for retention, for employees enjoying what they do, for you getting things done in a way that you're proud of. Like, as I always say to people, hey, Lisa and I ran the experiment of what it looks like when you don't have the right culture, and it's ass.
Yeah.
And we hated it as much as anybody else.
Yeah.
And not liking being at your own company, that's really lame.
Oh, that's awful.
And so when we founded Impact Theory, we're like, never again. Like culture is going to be a main thing that we hire against, that we hold people accountable to. We have something, do you know Ray Dalio?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh God, I love this guy. So for people that don't know, he built the largest hedge fund in the world.
Yep.
Amazing. And he has this thing in his culture that he calls dots. So everybody can give everybody else like a score on whatever, 30 different criteria.
Yep.
And so we have a bunch of those criteria that are part of our culture doc, like are people being hardcore, et cetera, so we can all rank each other.
I love that. You know what I find fascinating is the stuff when I was poor or not where I wanted that I ignored is the stuff that makes you millions and then tens of millions of dollars, like culture, like leadership. I used to think, what? Like I'm just here, I get a job done, I want to get rich, I want to do the thing, this is how it goes. And so, you know, I think it's really interesting. Whenever I'm with builders who have built a lot, they all want to talk about the same stuff. It's like, how do you get more humans to want to do the things you want them to do? Culture, leadership. And if people want to have real success and you want to do it in a way where you're not killing yourself all day, those two words are like two of the most important words in the English language. What's funny is I'm sure if we did a YouTube video and the title was how to build a $100 million culture, people would be like, snooze. But if you're like, how to make $1 million with the vending machines in 30 days, fucking millions of views. But guess what? The one on the left, the first one, $100 million culture, is so much more valuable than the vending machine video. And so if you can push through what the world wants you to listen to, which is literally the candy, the vending machine, the sweets, and you can actually want to eat the broccoli, oh my gosh, that's where all the magic is. It's actually funny because I was sitting with this the other day. I went to Team 3 of the Navy SEALs 40th anniversary of being in existence, right? It's cool. So this was the team that my husband was at. And we go onto the new base. It's incredible. Like we take a tour through, you know, these halls where like our friends, their gear when they were, you know, killed in action is sitting there, and my husband, a flag with his name written on it that was like taken away from ISIS and showed our, it was just incredible, right?
That's heavy.
It was really cool. It was cool to see the steps that land from people that you've known before. But what stuck with me from a business perspective is we're looking out at the ocean, it's beautiful, and we're sitting listening to 5 people speak. Admiral McRaven, who's probably one of the most well-respected living team guys. It's Johnny Kim? Anyway, both a Navy SEAL and an astronaut and a doctor.
Jesus.
I mean, total underperformer.
Yeah, not doing anything with his life.
Exactly.
Some people.
Yeah, and the current head of Team 3, what was fascinating is you had Admiral McRaven. He gave this incredible speech, right? Like best-selling author, one of the most senior guys in the military. You had the head of the team. You had overachiever Johnny Kim, astronaut, doctor, etc. But then at the very end, you had what's called this is CO, I think. Excuse me if anybody in the military is listening, I'm probably fucking this up, but he's like the head enlisted guy. So there's officers and then there's the enlisted guys, and they work hand in hand. But the chief enlisted guy is a badass. Sorry, I won't say his name because I don't know what's public or not. But anyway, he, at the very end of this like couple hour long segment, it's emotional. They're, mentoring some of the people that have died. I was looking at it from a team perspective and from an inspiration perspective. And all of these speeches were like relatively formal. They were good. But at the very end, he comes up and he has 7 or 12 team guys in full kits. So like machine gun or AR or something, all decked out with their gear, helmets on, and they go and they line up on the other side. And so it's like very jarring, right? You see them walk across the line. And what they are is they each represent members of the team that were killed in action over the years. And what was incredible is he closed out the ceremony and they would yell out the name of the person who was killed. So it'd be like, Brandon Looney. And then everybody would yell, hoorah, right? Like they yell really loud. And then they'd shoot off the machine gun. And so by the end of it, everybody's crying, everybody's yelling. And that guy had set the tone. He wasn't the leader. He wasn't the highest member of the team. But if there was one speech and one person you remembered and one person who everybody there, 600 people, would say is like the epitome of what they wanted Team 3 to be, it was that guy. And I think about that a lot because people sometimes think you got to be the CEO, you got to be McRaven, you got to be the head of the team. But like this guy was what they call the heart and soul of the team. And I think that is something really important to take with you for the members of your team and for the people listening who aren't at the top. Like you don't have to be at the top to be the person that everybody goes to. And that stuck with me ever since that day.
It's really powerful. So as somebody who walked a very unconventional path, started with nothing, like how do you walk that path? How do you go from being that guy to running something?
I think this guy's an interesting one to stay on for a second. We have a saying, we do the work. I think it's a well-known saying. We just say it at Contrarian Thinking too. But I think one of the ways that people don't realize is super easy to get ahead is there's two things. Curse of competence, which means there are actually very few competent, hardworking, driven people in this world. Way more than I think people realize. And you've seen it before. Like you've seen when somebody goes 10% more than the norm. It's pretty rare, actually. Like how many people have you had come in here and not impress you? Just be kind of like everybody else. Yeah. And then you notice the guy who's like, oh no, he's here before everybody else. Oh, he stays a little bit later than everybody else. Could be 10 minutes on both ends. Oh, he like submitted a brief and an update without being asked. Like do the work. Be that one competent human in a ocean of humans who are complacent instead of competent. And then the second thing I think that surprised me about how easy, quote unquote, easy it was to succeed is that most people say they want things, but they say it almost like hopes instead of wills. And so, my husband and I kind of talk about this a lot. And we're like, do you want it or are you going to do it? And he has this annoying saying he always says to me, which is like, are you a good white shark or are you a great white shark? And he says it to me. He says it to me often when we're working out, which is when I really want to murder him. But it's like a little family motto. Like, are you going to be kind of okay and good? Or are you going to be great? And the difference between good and great is 10% and nobody strives for it. And so for people listening, I mean, I don't know. Look, like how easy is that? Be there 10% earlier and stay 10% later than everybody else at your company for 6 months. Like, watch what happens. And if that doesn't get noticed at that company, go to the next one. Or build the next company in the 10 minutes that you're there in the beginning and the end. That's what I did at Goldman Sachs. I got recognized by the most senior director, and then I had multiple job opportunities after that. I wasn't smarter than anybody else. I didn't go to any fancy schools. I didn't have an MBA then, but I worked slightly harder than everybody else. I was competent, and I did a little bit more than everybody else, and that was it.
When somebody's aggressive, when they are working harder than other people, when you can tell they want it, it's a joy to be around.
It's a joy.
Like there really is something. And I talk about this a lot, like, don't make me drag you.
Oh.
Don't make me drag you. I'll drag you across the finish line if I have to, because I am going to succeed. But god damn, like if you can make me sweat, that's thrilling. Yeah. When I'm around people that I'm like, whoa, all right, look at this person. Like they're really showing up. They're playing to win. It's intoxicating. It's just for the right person. For me, that's a thrill to be around. I love that so much. And that really will get people a lot farther than they think.
Yeah, I agree.
Now, how did you actually start learning? Like, do you have a process for how you learned all this stuff? Because you were just saying earlier, you're now a finance person. Like you really understand the finance of a deal, but you weren't a finance person. Mm-mm. So you went from journalism to like straight up Goldman Sachs. Obviously there was something in the middle, but like, how did you go down the process of learning something that you did not previously know at all?
What I've been amazed by in life is that most people don't ask questions. They pretend like they know things.
Yes.
At the top, all the way to the bottom.
Why?
Because they think that if they ask questions, they look dumb. Mm-hmm. And what I found is I was trained as a journalist to do one thing: ask questions. And actually, the better the question, the better the result as a journalist. That's all. That's the only thing. And so I never associated asking questions with looking dumb. In fact, I don't care to this day. I ask stupid questions all the time. In fact, when we look at a deal, I'll often say, explain to me this like I'm 6. And then if they bring me a very large deal, Sam Zell was famous for this. I'm a big Sam Zell fan. He wrote Am I Being Too Subtle? Famous, they called him the grave dancer. And he was
the grave dancer?
Yeah.
That's quite the name.
He was famous for turnarounds of real estate businesses. So he would take them out of the grave. They would say he danced on it, but he would take these businesses that were going to fail and then turn them around and build them to something huge.
Impressive.
And Sam just passed away, actually. And he famously, when they would bring him a deal, like some multi-$100 million deal they were going to do, one deal, they threw it in front of him, big deal, had a deal book, professional, all these stats and everything, and he just flipped it back to him. And he said, should we do the deal? And the guy's like, well, I have 400 pages prepared here. And he goes, give this deal to me in a 1-page brief, and then I'll know you understand it.
Facts.
Yeah.
And so important. Oh my God. I'm constantly telling people, say your thesis in a single sentence.
Yeah.
Because if you can't say it in a single sentence, you don't understand it.
You don't understand it. And I realized this for myself too. In fact, if you want to get ahead quickly, I think, associating yourself with people who already have the things that you want is really important. One of the easiest ways to do that back in corporate land was everybody fought for one job, and that was the chief of staff job. You wanted to be chief of staff to one of the senior leaders. And the reason why is because you learned, one, what do they care about? And how do you learn what they care about? From the daily briefs you put together for them. And so you actually got a way to steal their 10,000 hours by looking at the very few things that they looked at every day that determined what was important for them. And so briefing has become really important at my company, and people get annoyed with me on this.
I was just going to say, I need to do briefs like this.
You need to do briefs.
It sounds hot.
Also, let me tell you, there's nothing sexier than a hot brief. And it's funny because my team, the other day, there's this one woman in our team, I'll shout her out, Mathilde, who does incredible briefs. And why does that matter? Because it shows me how you think. And the way that you think tells me how you work. And how you work tells me what you prioritize. And so these briefs are incredible. And the best way to learn them is you can actually see examples of the president's daily brief. And who could have a more succinct, important daily brief than the President of the United States? And so a lot of my team will look at that, and they'll also look at briefs for some of the largest CEOs out there. And so if you have a team at all, get them in the habit of doing this. And that, I think, is an incredible skill to get good at.
Yeah. I love that the most.
Yeah.
We will definitely be doing that.
I'll send you some examples of what I have
Yeah,
the team put
please.
together.
That would be incredible.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you're going about learning something, for me anyway, it's really rudimentary. It's I need to know the terms.
Yeah.
So that's going to be the first thing. So, and in fact, I went on a similar journey for a very different reason. So when COVID hit, I realized, the people, so going back to all my time in the inner cities, I was like, they're going to get obliterated. I didn't understand money printing yet. So I just thought they're fucked.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, I've got to find a really tactical, like personal finance vein to get people in on the show so that I can help. But I didn't understand finance at all. I'm good at making money. I'm not good at investing money. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to start learning about this, bringing people on, all that. Starts with learning the lexicon, figuring out who the players are, and doing what I call reading in swarms. Now, reading could be YouTube, whatever. You're just taking a topic, you're trying to see it from as many different angles as humanly possible. Have you ever seen those like sculptures that are made out of trash, but you can only see what they are from like one specific angle?
That's cool.
Okay, that's life.
Yeah.
And so if you're looking at business from the wrong angle, it looks like this big crazy mystery, and it looks like Klaus Schwab is, you know, the evil madman, and he's going to take over.
Yeah.
You start twisting it around and you realize, oh, it's just a bunch of people who think that they're smarter than they are, and they really should learn to distrust themselves. But once it clicks into place and you realize that Steve Jobs was right and the world was created by people no smarter than you, then it's like, oh, I'm seeing how this really is. But to do that, you have to see it from a lot of different angles. So when I'm reading about a topic, I'm trying to get as many different perspectives on that thing as I can so that I can triangulate on what the truth really is. Then once I have that and I have a sense of what this is, I'll formulate my own hypothesis. Hypothesis will make predictions. Then I go test that prediction. Now, if that prediction is accurate, then I know that I'm actually understanding this. And this is whether you're talking about business or romance, boys and girls, your brain is a prediction engine.
Yeah.
Once you realize that it is very hard to discern what is objectively true, very hard, even at the level of physics, we don't know.
Yeah.
So objective truth, so you get into perspective and interpretation. Okay, cool. But all of these things make a prediction. So I think if I do this, I'm going to get this outcome. Well, do it. If you got that outcome, then your understanding, your mental map of the world is pretty close. If you try it and you get something completely different, you need to understand your mental model is broken. Yeah. So if you point to other people, oh, it's their fault, it's the economy's fault. No. You didn't understand something. That's why it broke. Because let's remind St. Codie that booze don't block dunks. Doesn't matter how much somebody's trying to trip you up. Doesn't matter how bad the economy is. There is a solution to that puzzle. You just didn't find it. And so if you can own that, update your mental model and try again, just recognizing it as a prediction engine. So that's how I go in to learn any new thing. Does that sound roughly analogous to what you do?
I actually think I am much dumber on this. So the way
I'm going to say it isn't dumb. Whatever you're about to say, different perhaps.
So I'm much less scientific. So when I want to start learning something, I just go where the game is played. And
you get in.
I just get in. And so what that would mean in the beginning was I didn't understand finance. I wasn't smart enough to do what you said. You know, read in swarms, go find a predictive. I was like, where are smart finance people? I guess this company called Vanguard that's located here. Could I get a job there? And I go, I bet if I get a job there.
You get the job though, because they're going to be like, do you know finance? No.
The funny thing about humans are they love to hear themselves talk. And so one of the secrets to getting in job places is you just ask a lot of questions.
Jedi mind trick. Nice.
Yeah. And so at the time I sat next to this lady, Tara, and I was like, so what do you do? She's like, securities. And I'm like, oh, that's a lot of work. Because I thought she was talking about security at the, like, you know, she had a gun. But she was actually talking about...
So wait, you were applying for the job and at Vanguard and you didn't know what security
applying.
was?
I was sitting at a conference next to her, to be fair.
Okay.
So I sat next to her at a conference. Yeah.
Were you at the conference to learn about finance?
Yes.
Okay.
Finance conference.
Got it. To not know, to be at a conference for finance and to not know what a security is, that is amazing. Your story gets better by the second.
Yeah. Right. And again, why was I at the conference about finance? Because I wanted to get into finance, but I didn't know anything about it. So I just said, well, let's go to a place where they're talking about finance. So I go to a conference. Then I sit next to this lady. I get curious about her. I ask her all about her. I ask all about Vanguard. I get really curious about her job. What does she care about? What does she do? What's their mission? And when I get all those questions, I write down the answers. And so I'm actually getting the cheat code to what a hiring manager cares about at Vanguard because I'm asking her questions. And then she gets intrigued by the fact that unlike most humans, I'm not talking at her. I'm asking her information and I'm very tuned in. I'm like focused on her intently. And I follow up, which most people also don't do. I send an email afterwards. It was so amazing to talk to you. Here are 3 things I learned. Super interesting. Love to have coffee with you a second time. We have coffee again. I just ask a bunch more questions. And then she asks me to apply for this very was a rotational development program. So tons of people, all these fancy degrees everywhere, and little Codie who didn't know what a security or a mutual fund was. But I think, the difference was I was really curious. And that is an abnormal thing in a world of humans who pretend that they know what they mean.
So crazy.
And then, so if I was trying to do this again, I would do the same thing. When I wanted to get into content, what did I do? I just went and tried to talk to humans who knew something about content that I wanted to know. So if I wanted to understand media today, I would probably get really curious and I would learn on somebody else's dime. I think a job today is like a free MBA. In fact, it's an MBA that they pay you for. And it's really underrated to have a job early on. The average employee at Vanguard, they say they spend $100,000 on training per employee when I was making $30,000 a year. So I was given this free MBA at Vanguard, not to mention 3 licenses that I've carried for the rest of my life that have to be registered at a company. I couldn't get them any other way. And so I think people should just go get a fucking job working for somebody, learning from them, and go where the game's played. And then the amazing part is they could start in a factory with you. And if they're really hard workers, they're super curious, and they keep asking if they know thyself continuously, you're going to keep promoting a really smart, a very hardworking, very curious, iterating human. And you'll promote them to different things that they want to that are within their skill sets. And so I probably, to learn, I like to steal other people's 10,000 hours. I want to go where the game's played. I want to sit with a bunch of winners, and I want pressure. Because then I think you can learn. And it's, Lisa and I were talking about this a little bit earlier, but there is scientific research that shows that being surrounded by top performers increases your performance by 15%, and being around underperformers decreases your performance by 30%. And so if you're in a company with a bunch of underperformers, get in one where it is hard. And if you are hanging out with friends that all are underperformers, get in one where you're with some top performers, because you're going to earn 30% more money. Or you're going to earn, actually, what is it? You're going to earn 45% more money if you're around top performers than if you're around underperformers. And I think most people don't think about that. Like, people talk shit about Goldman. I'm like, that place is amazing for a young, hungry person. It's awful at a certain point, but for a young, hungry person, it's like top performers that are going to make me earn more, that are going to put pressure on me. It's the only way diamonds are made. It's the same thing in work.
I think the big problem is that people don't know, I'm going to use a gross word, but so it'll stick in people's heads. They don't know what their God is. And utility is my God.
Yeah.
Now, if you are pursuing something stupid, you will pursue the utility of stupid things. But if you're pursuing something honorable and it's the meaning and purpose for your life, how could you be focused on anything other than utility? That's the thing that drives me crazy. Thomas Sowell is, he just has one of my favorite quotes. And he says, the last 30 years have been marked by exchanging what worked with what sounds good.
Yeah.
And that is blasphemy in my worldview, because you are now abandoning utility, actual usefulness, actually moving in the direction of the thing that you want. And this is why, again, I'm just going to beat this drum to death. People need to understand what motivates their reasoning. Everybody's reasoning is motivated. It's motivated towards something. We were looking at the Tucker Carlson thing, postmodernism, motivated by power. So you get, to your point, I've never thought about it before, so I certainly reserve the right to change my opinion about anything at any time. But that the brutalism of the structures, which if anybody's never looked up brutalist architecture, it's actually a style of architecture that is brutal.
Yeah.
Heavy concrete, very few windows, nasty,
Post-Soviet sort of Eastern Bloc.
Gnarly.
Yeah. Right.
And ironically, one of them was just built in LA, which there was like a whole huge backlash, which I'm not surprised. Anyway, and the fluorescent lights and all that. If your assessment is right about why they're doing that, and my assessment is right that postmodernism really is about power and nothing else, then it becomes a statement of power. We are bigger, better, stronger than you. You work for us. You do as you're told. And that when you force somebody to pull into the light, what drives their thinking? Like, in fact, did you ever see the documentary, What is a Woman?
Yeah.
Okay. it fascinating. Glad they did it. However, it would have been more like it becomes just a dunk on the lunacy, and it really did come across as lunacy to me.
Yeah.
But we could have pulled it back out of lunacy if you just start asking, what are the base assumptions that are driving your rationale?
Yeah.
And when you make people state, like, this is why I believe that. And this, I learned this in business. So the physics of progress, you come up with a hypothesis about what you would need to do to achieve your goal. Okay, what does a hypothesis do? A hypothesis makes predictions. So when you're talking to somebody, what you want to do is say, okay, the things you're saying are the end result of a prediction you're making. That's invisible to me because you're not saying it out loud. You're just telling me the outcome. But if I think of that as a prediction, then I'm like, okay, for that to be true, the following base assumption has to be true. And so I'll just ask people, okay, because you're saying that, the following statement must be true. So for instance, if you want to give puberty blockers to a young child, that makes a prediction that you believe that self-professed identity is the most important thing in their life, and that you're even willing to put them through a medical procedure that has some risk of complication and death. Is that accurate? And they're going to say, yes, that's true. Or they're going to say, no, that's not accurate. But I believe if you deny them the ability to express their gender through a physiological change, that the rate of suicide goes up. Okay, so the prediction that makes is that they are more likely to die if they don't do this surgery. Is that accurate? Yes. Okay, cool. That's a testable hypothesis.
Yep.
It makes a prediction. I can now look at the data and find out, is that really true? Now, the problem becomes, if that's a red herring and that's not really what's motivating their thinking, then it will all fall apart, because I will present them with the data. And I actually don't know the answer to that. But let's say, just for the sake of argument, that it comes back and no, there actually is an increase in likelihood of suicide post-surgery. I don't know that's true. I'm just saying, if it were, if in that moment they go, oh, okay, word, like what we're seeing in England, where they've now banned the use, not just Tavistock closing down, they have now banned the use of puberty blockers on minors. Okay, so they look at the data and they change. Word, I'm here for that. But if somebody looks at the data and then they say, oh, no, we still need to do it for this reason.
Yep.
And you'll get this all the time with in business, where somebody will say, this is why I couldn't get that thing done. And you're like, okay, well, why didn't you do this? Well, no, that's not really the reason. It was because of this. Okay, why didn't you do that? Well, no, it's not really that. It's this. And I will say, you're making me chase you. Don't make me chase you. Just tell me the reason. And then we will, and if there's 4 reasons, give me all 4. And then we'll go through them one by one. But this is a knowable set of things.
Right.
The problem is, again, people, they argue with the level of fact. They're just 2 ships passing in the night, instead of getting down to, what are your base assumptions?
Yep.
What predictions do they make? And do those predictions come true? And if people start thinking through that, so rather than trying to be right or pass judgment, which is what I could feel in that documentary, instead of that, like, it's what I call trapping people in their own values. You just tell me your values, and then we'll see, is the thing you're doing leading to your value or not? And if your value is madness, then we can, at least I now know what your value is, right? Like Hitler, that motherfucker just told everybody what he was going to do.
Yep.
Need somebody to blame. Jews are going to work. They've worked all throughout history. So we're for sure blaming the Jews. And then we're going to take over Russia. Shh, don't tell them yet, but we're going to take it over because we want that to be the new version of what America was, whatever, 75, 100 years ago, where everybody just flooded into America for opportunity and land. He was like, that's going to be what we do with Russia, is it will be Europe's America. I mean, he literally just said this shit. And so he had a value system where it's like the lives of the German people, the Aryan race, whatever words he would have used, are superior.
Yep.
Okay, so that's a pretty ugly prediction that makes. That also predicts that you're going to do all the things that he ends up doing, but you're now pulling it out into the forefront. Nothing's hidden. Everything's out on the table. And now we can say, do we think that human life is equally valuable or not? And you start getting people saying this stuff, and it's like, whoa, now you can just follow things out to their natural conclusion. And you find the place where it breaks. Because what I'm always encouraging people to do is, you need to reflect somebody's beliefs values back to them in a way that they would recognize, so that they wouldn't be like, no, you're twisting my words or whatever. Now it's out on the table. Now you can make progress.
Yeah, it's really, I think if people want to understand what is happening in the world around them and be able to influence it quickly, efficiently, and without emotion, they should read a book like Statistics for Dummies. Because I actually think a lot of what you're talking about are two things. First is we don't understand statistics. We don't understand probabilities. We don't actually understand how to look at the numbers presented to us in a worldview. And statistics drive business, they drive wealth, they drive the economy. And then the other half is the being able to follow the scientific method. So I think X hypothesis. I want to test that hypothesis. Here's how the scientific method works. And those two things we learned in school, but they were not the focus of lots of what we did. I recall learning much more calculus than I did statistics. And in fact, statistics do not have to be super deep mathematical learnings. They can be understanding assumptions and how to read the math that is happening behind the scenes. And I think a lot of the reasons why we get sold a bunch of lies is because we don't actually understand statistics and scientific method. So we end up going with what feels good and sounds good as opposed to what actually works. And Thomas Sowell is a genius at this for many, many different reasons. But, if people haven't read Economic Facts and Fallacies from him, incredible book. If people haven't read Statistics for Dummies, good if you don't have a basis for how to understand when they show you I always love that example of sometimes when I go on the news, they'll ask me, what is the average XYZ? What is the average? And averages really bother me on average because it's a really poor way to measure, right? Especially monetarily. It's like, what does the average American make? Well, it really depends how you determine average because you have a few outliers in there. You have a bar, everybody makes 100K. Bill Gates walks into the bar, all of a sudden the average income goes from 100K to $10 million or whatever that would be. Why is that? It's because you should have used median and not average. And that's not actually mathematically difficult to understand. We could start there. We don't have to go to super complex biology, understanding cryptology, and deep understanding of the network state. We could just start with statistics and scientific method as opposed to emotions and narrative. I hear a lot lately that he who holds the best story wins. And I do think that is true. But the reason that is true is because people don't understand how to poke holes in arguments. Facts. And if you really want to win, be rich, be successful, you have to understand, is somebody lying to me about something that I can verify one way or another, which would be stacks, statistics, or scientific method.
All right, now let's see if we can agree on why that matters so much. Why does it matter to you?
Well, let's take it from multiple different angles. One, from a business perspective. Every business is a constrained business. Nobody has unlimited resources, right? So if you're just starting out, and you're doing the $100 startup method and you don't have much money and you don't know how to make a business work very well, you have very little dollars. So you have to understand statistics to understand where, if I put $1, will it be most likely to go out and bring back friends back with me? That's just probabilities and statistics. And so in business, everything you're doing, every decision you make is really just a determination of, should I do this or this? And which one of those is going to make me more money or more opportunity or more options or better decision-making, something. And so business is really just a complex game of statistics that ends in dollar signs, right? And I think the scientific method is so important because we think about it just in science, but all it is what you're talking about. It's like turtles all the way down. You're trying to figure out what lies underneath the things people tell you. So for instance, in our content business, because I come from finance, I push back really hard on ideas. So they'll say, well, we had this argument the other day, like words mean things. Words mean specific things. And if we don't agree on the definition of a word, we can't actually have a conversation. And so what is a good video? Well, lots of people might have different definitions of good. So I said, okay, at this company, a good video is one that gets the most views. Let's just baseline it. A good video at our company is the one that gets the most views. Is everybody on understanding about that? And we had to debate. They were like, well, what if it's this type of video where you're naked, or this type of video where somebody's getting shot, or like something awful? And I go, well, because we have our creed and our values, we would never make that video Because we understand our values and beliefs. So because we understand our values and beliefs, then we can decide on a quantitative determination of the word good in the video sense, which means views. Okay, fine. If we don't do that, you have a huge problem. Because then you go, well, I think this video is great. I think this video is great. I don't know what to do with that. That's like your personal taste in a video. And taste, as we all know from the fact that when we go out to a restaurant, very seldom do all of us order the exact same thing every single time. Why? Because our taste is different. And so I think a lot of business is getting really definitional. What does taste mean? Ooh, taste is difficult to define. So that is a bad word. Instead, we should use a word like, does it convert? Do I make money off of this thing? If I make money, then it is in taste with this company as long as it follows our creed. Does this video get views? If this video gets views, then it is tasteful according to us. And so a lot of people these days don't like definitions. They want to be really wobbly with them, but that's a huge problem because then you cannot have a conversation and you cannot agree on what a good outcome or a bad outcome looks like. But
that's why they do it.
Yeah, but I fuck you not, Tom. The other day I was like, they're like, can we please stop talking about this? And I was like, no, we have to like have a argument about what an individual word means. And we need to do that continuously across the company. And I need you guys to do that individually because otherwise we all feel good because we're agreeing, but because our foundation is not the same, we're not agreeing at all. But what I found with this generation again and again, and I fall into it too because I'm a people pleaser sometimes, is like nobody wants to have those tough conversations. How silly does it feel about arguing over what is one individual word good? And yet it's so necessary, right?
The infamous Christmas argument on my side. So yeah, we got in a huge debate as a company and it was me against everybody else. And I was like, I know I'm burning relationship capital right now because you all think I'm a psychopath, but I'm like, it was, I don't even remember what the specific thing was anymore, but it was like that. It was a single word and we're not moving on until we all agree that this is for that very reason. Now, you described exactly the way that I think about this. I use slightly different words, exact same idea. For me, the reason that, because it's all started with, why does it matter to detect a lie? And are we being lied to by people? The whole point of my channel is to say the world works in a certain way. The vast majority of it is behind a curtain that you've never looked behind. And so the whole goal of my life, which I just happen to make a show about, is that I am trying to figure out what's behind the curtain. And what I want people to understand is I've actually never watched the video with Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris where they debate truth. But the reality is that finding truth is really, really difficult. Now, the reason it's difficult is because we all wear what I call whole life beer goggles. And we cannot see what's really there. We're interpreting what's there. And so two people can look at the exact same thing and see something completely different. Now, I can spend time explaining how this happens from an evolutionary standpoint, but just for now, we'll say there are algorithms running in your brain and they will control how you perceive the inputs that are coming in. Okay, so if the world works in a certain way and words matter and narrative matters and even data can become narrative, at some point your life is controlled by how you interpret the things that are before you, what narrative you're telling yourself. And if your narrative doesn't make accurate predictions, it's broken. So the reason identifying a lie matters is because it breaks your prediction engine. And if you want to make money in business, statistics are going to be your best friend because you have to understand, do I do this or do I do this? Which is going to have the bigger impact? You're asking yourself a question of predictive ability. I predict that based on what I know, if I do this one, I'm going to get the outcome that I want. And that's why you do it. But if your worldview is messed up, if there's something you don't understand, you will choose the wrong thing. And of course, it's never one or two. There's usually 1,000 options before you. And so people just have no idea how to choose because they don't know how they think. They don't know where they're being lied to. They don't know how to dissect the information that's coming in. They don't know how to test hypotheses. They don't understand that when somebody puts something forward, it makes a fucking prediction. And if you ask people, if you stop and go, okay, hold on a second, what prediction does that statement make? And then I'm just going to ask you, is this true? And if in that moment you're worried about looking stupid, then you're just going to nod and smile when they give you some bullshit answer, which they will almost always do because they probably don't know what's driving this. They probably have never thought about the prediction that it makes. But man, if you really are unafraid to look stupid and you say to somebody, okay, for what you just said to be true, the following base assumption also has to be true. And I'll just say it to them. Is that true? Or this makes that prediction. Is that accurate? And if they say no, one of two things is true. Either they're wrong, which happens more than you would think, and I'm talking from experts, the brightest minds in the world, or you don't understand something. And if you don't understand something and you're not afraid to look stupid, then just keep asking and asking and asking. You understand somebody's worldview, statement, whatever, when you go, it makes this prediction, is that accurate? And they say yes. Then it's like, okay, cool. I understand what you're saying. And now that I understand, I can't be bamboozled. Yeah. And that is the only way to get good at business. And this is why, okay, I think I may have learned this from you, so forgive me. Specialists, generalists. The reason that your business content is so good and your business content is so good is because you're a specialist. You buy businesses all day long. I'm a generalist. So I launched a course called Business Decision Making. That is the greatest course. I really believe this. That is the greatest course on entrepreneurship ever taught. And all I did was say to whatever the small group of people, bring me your hardest business problem and we're going to solve it in real time. And then I would just walk people through. This is how you do it. I don't need to know your industry, none of that. Like, I'm going to think from first principles. I'm going to ask you questions about what you said, makes a prediction. I mean, literally all the things I'm just talking about, but in real time. Hey, and you're going to come back week after week and we're just going to keep going. Okay, now you made progress. What's the next problem? Boom, boom, boom. We go through it and live fire. And what I would say to people is, I know you think you want copywriting or you want funnel marketing or all of that, but you can hire somebody to do that because it's very finite and it's very teachable. The real thing that makes an entrepreneur great is the ability to solve novel problems. It is a problem not only have you not seen before, nobody's seen before. And so now you have to be able to build up from first principles to think through it. But that shit, hardest thing in the world to sell, because people know this is your painkillers versus vitamins. That shit is a vitamin. And people want painkillers. They know they have a problem. And if you market it as, I'm going to take you from $0 in revenue to $3 million in revenue, that shit'll sell all day long.
You're exactly right.
God damn it. It isn't all weather. It will work for one thing in that one moment, but it doesn't translate because it's not a framework.
100%. I mean, I think a couple things there. One is the real definition of a CEO is a scary one. So if you say you want to be a CEO, here's what a CEO is. It's you go out, you hire the smartest people you can possibly find. You tell them to fix problems. Then they find the problems that are so hard, even the smartest people you can't find can't solve them. They bring them back to you, and you have one job only, which is to deal with the worst problems that the smartest people that you know can't solve. That's all a CEO is. And so if you think you are anything more than a firefighter in the most complex fires of all time, you're crazy. The CEO is not a fun, easy, breezy position. I've never met a CEO that felt that way. That's why they moved to chairman after a while, because they let somebody else deal with it. And so I think that's exactly right. The other thing that I find fascinating there is, so I started contrarian thinking in 2020 with this idea that people have lost their minds. They are no longer able to think because they can't question anything. And I believe that I will give you will make more cash if you are curious than if you are a genius. And the reason why is because you can use the collective genius if you are curious, and you are limited by your own genius if you are not. And so, especially with the world of ChatGPT, if you are a genius but unwilling to ask questions because of your own brilliance, you have just lost the world of knowledge. And so I believe our ability to question things is integral to our individual success. And yet I thought people were losing that ability, and they were smothering it, and they were saying it was wrong to question things. And I thought that was criminal. So I started contrarian thinking, and I was like, we are going to teach you to question things, to be contrarian, not for the sake of it, but in order to learn. And then it was crickets. And people were like, I think just fine. This noggin's pretty smart. I don't need your help thinking better. Like, nobody really goes around and says, I wish I could think better, except those at the very, 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 very top. It's like a 1% problem. Most people think that they think fine. They just haven't found the deal, the money, the next job, the girl, the whatever. They don't think there's anything wrong with the way that their brain functions. And unless it's a pill that can make them like superhuman intelligence. And so I quickly realized that, okay, if I want people to think differently, how could I get them to do that? What would be the Trojan horse to think in? And I was like, well, what do all humans want? They want love in some degree. They're greedy. They want like some sort of personal wealth, right? And they want maybe relevancy in some way, shape, or form. You could also say they want health, right? And so if we have wealth, health, sex, greed, which do I know a lot about? Well, I don't really know that much about health. I don't really want to talk about sex on the internet. Wouldn't say I'm an expert there either. But what about wealth or greed? Well, yeah, I know a lot about that. I've been in finance for a long time. So what if I could Trojan horse my way into thinking by getting people to talk about money? I'll tell them how to make more money. But in the process of telling them how to make more money, I'm actually going to get them to think about something more important, which is ownership. And what do ownerships have? They have personal responsibility for outcomes. When you have personal responsibility for outcomes, you have incentive alignment. When you have incentive alignment, then when somebody breaks something that you own, you feel it. When somebody lifts up something that you own, you feel it. You have the pleasure-pain, cycle happening within you. And so that is why we eventually started talking about money and contrarian thinking, because I realized it's a Trojan horse to getting people to care about decision-making because they actually have skin in the game and ownership. Ownership is the key to freedom. And that in fact, if you do not have control over your life through financial freedom, it's very hard to have other levels of ownership. And I think that is true.
Yeah, no doubt. Man, ownership is such a part of your message. And I think it's so important. Why don't people have that like push now? That's not the cool thing that it once was.
Yeah, it's not, is it? Yeah, it's interesting. The other day, we had an employee, decide that they wanted to leave to go into a meditation community.
Like a monastery?
Not really sure. And I thought about that at first. A really good employee, by the way, great employee. And I thought, well, what is that decision making? And I went back to the quote, and I can't remember who it's from, but that the purpose of faith or religion is to live it in life. That are you truly it's why the Dalai Lama doesn't stay in Tibet, right? His purpose is to go spread this faith that he has while living life, because life is hard and difficult. It's very easy to stay peaceful if you're in 24/7 meditation states. And yet I think this generation, they presuppose that if they find the perfect circumstance, that will lead to bliss, instead of realizing that actually bliss is found in the difficulty. And so I don't know about this personal situation with this individual, but I thought about this a lot, because I thought, what would make somebody like put their life on pause that way and stay in this one situation? And I think the reason is because we have not been conditioned in this generation to find joy in difficulty. Instead, we want to find joy in extreme pleasure. I mean, look at what we've done to this generation. I mean, this is wild. And even to parents today, we said, parents, run your kids around 24/7 to all of these activities. If they get upset in any way, shape, or form, run to the principal, talk to the parent on their behalf. Don't let them handle it. If something is wrong with them and they are sad or anxious, they are probably depressed, or maybe they have ADHD. We're going to label them and pathologize them as opposed to tell them they're having a momentary issue. We're going to get them into the most expensive colleges, or any college we can, but then they will have a massive amount of student debt. And then on top of that, we're going to tell them that, no, it's okay about every single feeling that you're having, and that is all of this trauma. And yes, your cat died 15 years ago, and you are still carrying that inside of your hips, and that's why they're tight, right? Because that's where you hold the trauma from, fluffy. And so this is what we've told parents and kids. And so of course they're confused. They're confused, and they don't know what real joy is, and they've checked all the boxes. They've done all the things that they thought they were supposed to do, and it's led to them being like in debt, not that happy, not with a partner, and so what's next? So I do, as much as I kind of give my generation, our generation, and the next generation a little bit of a hard time, I really get it, because I was told all those same things too, and had to come out on the other side and realize, no, I'm the only one responsible for my happiness, and that there's actually a lot of joy in the journey, and there is no destination that you can reach. And by the way, you can never stay for the rest of your life in perfect meditation. The point of meditation is not that. It is to be in life. You know, I heard this thing the other day that I really liked. I think it was Mel Robbins. And Mel Robbins was saying, the eye of the hurricane is what she tries to be. So, you know, if there's a hurricane and there's chaos and there's tumult and there's broken windows and danger and floods, on the exterior of the hurricane, in the middle of it, it's silent and serene. And so her goal is, no matter what's happening out here, that she wants to stay silent inside. And as I was thinking about that, I was like, I like that philosophy. And I was like, but you know what's even more interesting? The bigger the hurricane, the bigger the eye, right? The more silence inside of it. So if you put yourself in bigger, more intense situations, are you able to find a deeper level of silence and quiet and contemplation? And I think the answer is yes, you are, which goes back to the Ted Turner, we lost $100 million on that. And so if we all will die, and it may be painful at some time, and the only truth in life is that we will experience pain, we will die, and all of our loved ones will die, and they will probably not remember us much sooner than we would ever like, then we should probably prepare ourselves for that with a bigger hurricane, so that as we look the true difficulty of life, that is eventual death and difficulty on the path of it, it doesn't daunt us because we've lived in difficulty too. And so I come closer and closer to that, you know, that Buddhist idea of, you know, that life has suffering, life is suffering. But that's sort of the point of it all, and that you can find joy in that. And it's way too deep, you know, Tanner would go, that's deep. But I think it might be true.
The storm destroys most everyone that it touches. That's the problem. How do you, do you think about that?
Like creating hurricanes for no reason?
No. Do you lament to God, wail from your gut at the fact that you can create an eye in the middle of the largest storm, but that most of the people you know and love will get torn to pieces?
I don't think that I have that individual power. I think all of us are like, I get really careful about like overstating what I think I'm capable of. And so I don't think I am capable of destroying the ones around me.
No, not you. I'm saying that I am very distressed that most people will not be able to do. Most people won't be able to be a CEO. Most
they
people
won't survive their own hurricane they create.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like this is one of those where I don't want it to be true. I've just seen it play out too many times.
Yeah.
And you and I have both said the same thing. So I know that you see what I'm about to say, which is step number one of being a CEO is ask yourself, do you really want to be a CEO?
Yeah.
Because all I hear when someone says I want to be a CEO is that you want to get punched in the face over and over and over. No, it really, like really. And the longer I do it, the more punches I take.
Yeah.
And you do start going, I routinely am asking myself, why am I doing this? And in fact, it's really interesting to compare my wife and I. Okay, so I have married my equal. My wife is unimaginable, and she has helped me become the person that I am, and I really don't even know who I would be without her because of how gifted she is and how smart she is and all that.
Yeah.
She can't do what I can do.
Yeah.
So, and she will be the first to tell you. I mean, she did tell you literally before we started rolling. She was like, I don't want to be CEO. I see what he has to deal with and I don't want it.
Yep.
And that, like, it is so exciting for me. And I can give the speed, I can be the dancing bear that you poke fun at.
Yep.
I can be the dancing bear of motivation and be very performative around like just living in that personality of the person that can create the calm and that you can do anything you set your mind to. And then I've seen it up close. And the reality is that most people don't have the skill. Yeah. Emotional management. That's what being the eye of the storm is can everything be burning down around you and you're not panicking? Yeah. You're concerned, you're taking decisive action, but you're not panicking. Yeah. And what I have found is that the person you lost to the monastery-like place, they're the norm.
Yeah.
What's interesting is to steelman their argument, I keep in my back pocket that life choice.
Mm-hmm.
I studied Eastern philosophy a lot when I was younger. At one point, I actually called myself a Taoist, and I meant it. I was a Taoist.
Interesting.
And I always contended with the idea of becoming a monk of some kind. And I thought, I really believe that the wellspring of all suffering is desire. That makes sense to me. But what I found was that felt like a choice between engaging with life and disengaging from life. And you could say that you're engaging with the pursuit of non-attachment, but it just isn't how it felt to me.
Yeah.
And I'm perfectly willing to accept that maybe that's just the part of my spiritual journey that I'm on. And one day I'll start laughing at myself that, detachment was the right answer all along.
Yeah.
But I decided I'm going to fully engage with life. But for my sanity, I keep in my back pocket that I could just stop wanting any of this.
Yeah.
And the second I stop wanting to grow my YouTube channel, to make more revenue, to be an entrepreneur for the ages, to build the next Disney, I could just let go of all of that. And if I actually let go of it, all of a sudden those punches don't hurt anymore. They don't matter. You just let it go. Now you do have to contend with freedom coming from financial freedom. Mm-hmm. But one way to do that is to beg for food and live in either a monastery or a cave and come out every now and then with your rice bowl. I don't pass judgment on that lifestyle.
Yeah.
I just don't currently want it for myself, but it's in my back pocket.
Yeah. I like the back pocket idea. I think it's really important, and I don't have a good definition for it, so I have to work on this. But this idea of ownership, I do not think has to mean owner. I think there needs to be a difference between the two. And ownership, in my opinion, there's like 4 levels to rich, I think, about monetarily. And so you have the first level is like a spender. You make money, you spend it. The second level is a saver, right? You make money, you save some of it. The third level is an owner, in my opinion, that you take the money and you apply it towards your pursuits. So you invest in you working more, your business, etc. And the fourth level is an investor. And that's you take your excess and you invest it in other people and their pursuits. And the levels, you can't really go from a spender all the way to an investor, I don't believe. I think you kind of have to climb the rungs. And I've thought a lot about what does ownership mean, because I do not think everybody should be an entrepreneur or CEO in any way, shape, or form. But I do think that they should have some skin in the game for what they're doing, and they should have a way where they can continue to earn even if something catastrophic happens to them. So that could be that they have additional income streams, that could be investments, that could be that they help their wife or husband learn a new skill, and thus the family has multiple income streams in what they do. That could mean, sovereignty in that they live on the land and they subsidize part of their, income that they would need by growing things or having agricultural tax credits. But I think it's really important that we don't become, like you talked about, people who own nothing and like it. I think we can be people who want less material things because our neighbors have them, but simultaneously have more ownership of the things that can protect us from negative consequences, like a health event where you need money, like an authoritarian regime that tells you they want you to do X, Y, and Z. Money is it's an option that you get to either use or not use. And so I need to narrow down this idea of ownership, but I do think you're right. Not everybody should be a CEO. And what trouble would we be in if everybody was one? Who would work with us, right? I think the job of a CEO also is to have a dream so big that your umbrella has room enough for many people, and to sell them that dream and to show them that your dream is bigger than anything that they could create individually and is going to uplift them in a way that is bigger than what they could do by themselves. It might be more fun and might be more interesting because high-performing teams are a joy to be in. I actually think one of the worst things that ever happened to us was that we sold this lie that remote work was better for us. I think it was actually really detrimental, and mental health numbers seem to show that. And that, I say online a lot, our teams, we make them as much as possible come back to the office. And it doesn't mean they have to be there every day. We don't put them under fluorescent lights and cubicles. But we do require them to now all be in Austin for contrarian thinking. We bought a studio there. We bought a headquarters. We're hiring like crazy. My other company, BizScout, is located there too. Contrarian Thinking Capital's based there. So is Main Street Holding Company. And so I'm bringing all the people back into the office because I see what happens when they're on an island. And I think it's really, really negative. But I have to get closer on that idea of ownership in order to explain it. Like even how, it used to be that the people who owned companies were not unaligned shareholders that just gave them money for their stock, right? That really have no ability to affect the outcome. You and I both, anybody who owns stocks, you have a percentage of Google, you have a percentage of Amazon, but you are not really aligned with the employees and the people inside of Google or Amazon. You just want as much money as you can get for that stock. And there's actually really perverse short-term incentives that happen with that.
Really perverse.
And so I think as an employee, part of your game should be, I want to make as much money as I can to a certain degree, and then I want to invest it in things that ROI to me, and I want to find ways to skill stack to become so valuable that the people I work with will give me some percentage of a company, a deal, an opportunity to invest in another company alongside them. And that's where I think we went a little bit wrong. Like my employees don't have equity at Contrarian Thinking. Well, one does now, but two of them just got equity at one of my other companies. And so they're now partners, they're owners in that business, even though they're also employees. And I think we should be able to do that a lot with our top performers. And just like people shouldn't stay at minimum wage, they should aspire to grow into more,
I agree aggressively. What do you think about BlackRock and other big companies buying everything?
So Main Street Holding Company is where we own all of these companies, right? We have like 26 companies in the portfolio right now. And not so long ago, my goal was I want to create the next KKR or Carlyle. I was like, I saw how these guys operate. I want to create a private equity fund that's just as big. I've already raised $1 billion fund at First Trust.
Not bad.
And yeah, I can do this again, but let's do it in a better asset class, which would be private companies. And so I was on my merry way buying these companies. And then I kind of started seeing what was happening with a lot of these private equity owned companies. And it's stripping the employees, turning it into postmodernist buildings with fluorescent lights and cubicles. It's nobody knows your name when you go to the corner store. It's that they have perverse incentives because they want to strip it and flip it to somebody else, and then that next person wants to strip it and flip it. And a lot of these companies, get sold by 3 or 4 private equity companies before they go public, and they've lost kind of their soul. And so I realized, man, I want to build $1 billion company, maybe multiple $1 billion companies.
Hey.
But I don't want to own all of America's small businesses. I want Americans to own those businesses. And if I can create value by building something that hasn't existed before, that's cool. But do I have to go gobble up all the things that other people could own within their communities? No. And so I am very much pushing back against the big guys owning everything, and we have to work for them. I think. And I don't know if we talked last time, but for those economic nerds on here, like if you don't understand the unfair advantage that BlackRock and Blackstone has, it will scare the hell out of you. Like if you think about it this way, they have immense data, right? Because they've been doing this for a long time. They have most of their former executives having at some point or the other worked in the Fed, been consultants for the Fed, been in political positions, been the chairman of the Fed. They have also, by the way, all been at varying companies like the CEO of BlackRock and Blackstone, who have both, one's been an owner of the other company before. And they get rates to buy these companies and houses and assets and anything that you want to talk about that are like 1/2 to 1/3 to 1/4 of the rates that we have if we want to buy these individual companies. And why do they have that? Because they have all our money. because you and I have our investments at BlackRock in their ETFs, which means that they get to use those assets on the balance sheet to have lower rates to buy things that then increase the prices of single family homes in the US with our dollars. And I think that is criminal. And I don't love the government regulating many things, but I think they should at least get their neck off the little guy.
Get their foot off the neck of the little guy?
Get their neck off the foot of the little guy. Yeah. Get their foot off the neck of the little guy.
What do people need to know about how the world really works and how you went from being an underpaid journalist to buying a portfolio of small, what you call boring businesses that now kick off just under $100 million in annual revenue to you?
Business in general, especially small business, gets way overcomplicated. So we hear these stories of Silicon Valley billionaires who have exited these giant tech companies and built this next social app or Tesla. And in reality, your richest neighbor, maybe not in this neighborhood, but in most neighborhoods, is probably somebody who owns a plumbing company, somebody who owns a local landscaping company. The community all around you, the services you use every day, can make you a lot of cash. And what makes real change is that, money is the architect for change in our world. You want to get somebody elected? Money. You want to change your local community? Money. You want to have different zonings so you can change the businesses in your local area? Money. And so I don't acquire money because I want Lamborghinis and fancy things. I do it because I think it is a way to freedom, because it is a tool for power. I mean, when I first had money was when I made like $30,000 when I left college. I mean, I made no money out of college and I thought I was super rich and I might never have to work again. And then I heard about taxes and figured that out. But quickly, I realized that, I worked at a big company called Vanguard at the time. And Vanguard was the world's largest financial manager. And what was fascinating about that company is the people inside of Vanguard touched, at the time, I think $1 in every $4 in the US economy was touched in one way or the other because of the mutual funds and pensions that they invest. And I realized, wow, these humans speak a language that I don't understand. Like ROI, EBITDA, basis points. There's this whole other language, and finance has that for a reason. They have it because you and I, as normal people, do not speak that language. And so they say, give me your money, Tom, and trust it to me because you, poor thing, aren't intelligent enough to understand how to shepherd your own future. And so I had people calling me in 2008 when I worked at Vanguard, crying, asking me how Vanguard could have stolen their money because of the crisis, and not realizing that the stock market has fluctuations in it. And at that point, I realized, oh, wow, like I'm never going to let this happen to me and mine. And that was hard because my family thought to chase money was evil and that we were happy and we didn't have a lot of money. So you don't need money. And then I heard this thing called the napkin theory. I can't remember who came up with it, but basically at the time I was struggling with, am I okay to chase after money? Like, is this bad? Am I a bad person for this? And I heard this story about a napkin. And imagine yourself in the middle. So you are standing in the middle, Codie, and around me is my mom, my dad, my brother, my sister, let's say, on each of the four corners. And when you, Codie in the middle, pick up your napkin like this, in order of pursuing financial freedom, you lift up everybody else around you, right? Because you can't be what you can't see, and also because money trickles. People talk about trickle-down economics. We could think about that one way or the other. But money, actually, when you have more of it around your family, you can hire your family members. You can build new businesses. You can create more wealth by spending it. And so they explained it as one of the best pursuits you can have is pursue it so you can pick everybody else up. And that changed a lot for me. I have a bunch of businesses that I own, right? These small businesses largely run by blue-collar workers. And I remember I called up one of the operators in one of my companies, the guy who runs the whole thing, oversees, let's call it 100 employees and contractors. And I was like, I want to do events for our line workers. So for blue-collar, largely Hispanic, same thing. And I want to do self-improvement events. Like, what could we do? What would they be interested in? We'll pay them to go, even. And I remember he said to me, they won't go. They're not interested in personal development. You can't find those people. And I thought that was so fascinating. So I called up a couple other operators of some of the businesses that I owned. This was back in the day. And like 2 or 3 of them kind of like pranced around it a little bit, you know, were a little bit PC, and then said the same thing. I was like, that's fascinating. So are they right? Or like, is there some miscommunication? And what I basically realized is that the language that we use, even the people on YouTube listening to this right now, by and large, most of the people listening already understand the words personal development. They think it's a good thing, not a bad thing. And most people that are blue collar workers, at least in my experience that I've worked with, they think about personal development a bit like therapy. Like I told my dad I was going to go to therapy with my husband proactively, like before we got married. He was like, what's wrong? Are you guys okay? And I was like, no, it's because we want to work on this thing called marriage, which seems important, and I failed at it once. So like, maybe we should get some help. And he was like, okay, that's bizarre. You know, and then I told my mom kind of the same thing. Now they're smart, great humans, but the words meant something different to them. And so what I realized with our group is, oh man, we basically have, I think there's sort of 2 worlds in the US right now, and maybe even 3, but one world are, you know, it's kind of the elites. And the elites might even mean white collar workers in corporate jobs that use words like quiet quitting. Those words don't fucking exist in blue collar land. And so what I tried to do early on is I realized I had some of those words like, oh, therapy, bad. Personal development, why? What's wrong with you? You know, and I had to navigate and negotiate my language. That was the only way I could change my relationship with money. So it started with being okay with things like personal development, which is totally normal now. The other thing I'll say is I get really annoyed today when people, especially like on Twitter, let's say, they start saying things like, oh yeah, you should just get up at 5 a.m., get into an ice bath, then sauna, then whatever, like, you know, you nerds. And it's like, hey, I know that that seems crazy for a lot of people, but you guys are so inculcated into this world of being elites that you don't even realize you're being extra elite by trying to tell people that have never experienced what it feels like to get up early and meditate, that that's unnecessary because it's actually really powerful. So instead of trying to like break out of the, you know, world we live in where people are obsessed with personal development, realize most people are not in that world and help them. Don't try to belittle it. And that is an interesting cycle I think we're in right now today. It's like self-education is bad. And I think that's so wrong.
I can't remember where I heard this, but somebody said, it might have been you, where there's mystery, there's money. Like, are people intentionally creating a false version of the world to keep other people down?
I think in this case, it's more people don't realize that they live in bubbles. People on the internet largely talk to other people on the internet that are just like them. And so a lot of the people who are mouthpieces, like you and I, let's say, and you've been at it a long time, they never had your experience of hiring ex-convicts, speaking to them and driving them around Beverly Hills. Never. And probably a lot of this generation is like solo entrepreneurs who like that idea of being a solopreneur and want to talk about on the internet, hey, I built this business at $10 million in 90 days and I have no employees. And I think that's a fucking tragedy. I think one of the most incredible things you can do is hire people. They're going to drive you crazy, but they're also going to mean you have a legacy on this planet that's above and beyond just what comes out of your body as a small child or human. And so I just think they don't realize how bubbled they are, and that their idea of happiness, aka a solo entrepreneur with $10 million, I think it's going to be really empty in the years to come. Because you know this too, but there's nothing better than watching one of your employees change completely underneath, you could call it your leadership or just within your culture, and building this thing where people are creating bigger than you. It's an incredible feeling. So that's my belief.
Yeah, I'm obsessed with that moment where somebody realizes, oh, I'm actually capable of more than I thought that I was. Yep. So for me, it really did feel like as I climbed my way up, what I was doing was pulling the curtain back and seeing how the world actually works. And that sense has not stopped for me. Like the farther I go, the more I learn, the more I succeed, the more I'm like, oh, whoa, like the world works in a certain way. And getting into finance was actually the big thing for me. That was the first time where I felt like maybe there really is a conspiracy. Like when you start to understand what inflation really is, It's like, bro, what is happening? So how do you, because you're a big believer in, and I think this is something that we'll really share. So I step back and I look at the world and I feel like it's losing its mind. And I'm like, the fuck is happening? And never did I think that I would deal with culture war stuff or anything even remotely politicky. And then I realized that the world is tearing itself apart because of bad ideas. And that really is my jam. So how we start getting people to pay attention to good ideas. One thing you said that really resonated with me is getting more people to have skin in the game. Because if you own part of the house, you don't want to tear it down. What do you mean by that? And what are you actually trying to help people discover in that moment?
Yeah. There's a famous law called tragedy of the commons, right? And it's an economic theory that is really crucial if you want to understand why people burn instead of build. And I heard about it from a famous economist by the name of Thomas Sowell.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
If I was going to be a fanboy for anybody, it would be Thomas Sowell.
Me too. His book, Economic Facts and Fallacies, I think is crucial reading for anybody that wants to understand numbers, not regurgitate them. And to do it in a way that is a competition of ideas, as opposed to, let me just shout my idea the loudest. And he talks about, for instance, when I lived in DC, I saw it firsthand. We were in a new development. We were in Columbia Heights, and you know, some of the streets were the hood. Some of the streets were brand new developments. Across from us was a big project that went up, subsidized housing, really well done, pretty. And sadly, within about the year that we were living there, it went from like a nice establishment to by the end, most of the houses boarded up. 1 year.
Woof.
And I remember sitting there watching it. And at the same time, I was rereading Economic Facts and Fallacies. And Thomas Sowell talked about this, about how instead of subsidizing housing, aka making it cheaper for people, but having no skin in the game, nobody is responsible for anything in that place. And some of them live for free. What they've done is they've taken away their personal sovereignty. You know, have you guys ever been on a street, let's say, and you see those scooters around, right? That everybody, you can rent for a few dollars, whatever, bird scooters. And they're like beat to hell. You know, they're thrown on the sidewalk. In Paris, they throw them in the Seine all the time. And that is the tragedy of the commons in action. If that was your scooter, you would take care of it. But because you don't own that scooter and you have no incentive one way or the other to take care of it, you beat it up. And you being collective you, all of us. And so I think one of the biggest problems in our society today, we did this huge research analysis, and it shook me. And it was, we looked at subsectors in the US economy. So not just construction, but let's say hardware stores and roofing companies. And what we found is across, I can't remember how many subsectors, but let's say 30 or 40, that 25 to 30% of all subsectors are owned by the top 10 companies in each sector, and that number is growing rapidly. So we don't own our local businesses anymore. We don't own our homes as much anymore. 1 in 4 single-family homes in 2022 was bought by an institutional buyer. And so we are we're doing the narrative that's supposed to not be true, which is that, you know, you will own nothing and be happy about it.
Yeah.
And we're doing it, we're letting it happen right in front of our eyes. And I think that's a horrible thing, because you have all been to, I mean, you've certainly seen it here in LA, but you go to a Starbucks, right? And outside it's like kind of dirty, beat up. The greeter doesn't know your name. The barista spells it wrong. They get your coffee. The beans are kind of burnt, and it's lost what it was. The mermaid is no more. And then you go to a local coffee shop, and what do you feel? Like it's the same person every day. I just was at one in San Diego the other day. Gosh, I wish I remember his name so I could shout it out, but great little coffee shop in Bird Rock. The owner is right there. He's making the coffee for me. We get to know each other. He's having a community party on Sunday. That is never going to happen at a Starbucks. And that's why owning those small businesses is so important, I think. And that skin in the game is all the difference. And then I'll shut up. But last thing is just, I don't think everybody should own a business. It's hard. You know that better than anybody. You've been playing this game in a big way. But I do think having some incentive where if I do X more, I can make Y more, and I can leave my stamp on the world, is really important. So that's my mission.
I love that. I think it's really important. As you were talking, so you're going to own nothing and be happy. So when I got into this, I really thought anybody, if you believed in any conspiracy, you were out of your mind. You were like, oh, geez, do I even have time to have this conversation? And then I really started thinking about the way that people think. So here's my thesis. Dear smart people, stop trusting yourself because you think you're real fucking clever. And I'm just going to tell you right now, you're wrong more than you're right. I'm glad you're there. I'm glad the world has smart people. And I'm glad that people really push the envelope and do things and take chances and believe in themselves. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is the scientific method. Like you have to approach everything with humility. And when I hear things like you're going to own nothing and be happy, it's like, bro, stop trying to do top down. Top down always ends in tyranny. Not once, not most of the time. It always ends in tyranny. Mm-hmm. And so seeing people snatching buildings up or whatever, one, I think it's unwise to think of it as a grand conspiracy. I think it is better to think of it as well-intentioned people. They aren't evil. They certainly don't view themselves as evil. Mm-hmm. But they have a belief system that we have to dunk on. And we have to understand, we being anybody listening to this, that you can get so good, they can't stop you from controlling your own life. You can get so good that you can buy a bevy of boring businesses that generate $100 million. That's so crazy. And getting people to understand that. And I love that you used to be a journalist, that you did not go to Harvard, that like, I think at one point you said, I did more keg stands than like MCAT prep. I forget what the other thing was, but I was just like, oh God, it was so on point. And yet you learn the rules of a game and now you play that game well. And so I've been thinking a lot about, okay, my show's evolved a lot over the years, always with the same mission. This moment, I want people to understand that you can get so good at the game that nobody can stop you. That's it. It's the only reason I do all of this. I work this fucking hard for that one thing. And as I get into this part of my thing where I'm trying to have way deeper conversations. So for the person that's been following me for 7 years, it's like, cool, in the beginning, we got your mindset right. Then we helped you get your personal finances and your relationships right. And now we're like full reality distortion field. And what I want people to understand is that the game of life has rules. You can master them and you can play to win. And so the tagline I'm noodling on is life is a beautiful game, because I don't want people to hear wolves howling in the background. I don't want them to think of Klaus Schwab as an evil guy. He really thinks he's good. Yeah. Like he really thinks he's trying to help you. Yeah. And if you approach him in that way, you'll be better off. Anyway, I want people to understand life is a beautiful game, but you need to master it. Yep. And so looking under the curtain, seeing how all of this works, like that really is what I'm all about at every level, whether I'm doing a comic book, working on the video game, or doing one of these interviews. It's like, lift up the curtain, see how see that it has rules. Once you know how to play, then you can really get good.
Oh yeah. Well, I love that. Because I think you're right. I mean, think about, first of all, the beautiful game's interesting because that's what they call football or soccer around the world, and which is the most viewed sport in the world, right? Globally, yep. Which I love. And I think also, if you think about it as a game, then you think about problems as levels, and you think about them as natural, and you start to look forward to the solution of said problem, as opposed to expecting that life, instead of a game, is a vacation with a Mai Tai on a beach chair somewhere, which I think is what a lot of us expect. Like, it should be easy. I should have this. It's not fair that this happened. It's like, why do we think that we want life without some villains in it and without some worthwhile adversaries? There's no David without Goliath. And so you need those enemies and adversaries, because they're how you level up. How boring of a game would it be if we were just handed the prize as soon as we walked on stage? What are we going to do with the rest of our time? And so I've really tried to program my mind over the years and to learn from people who look at problems and they're like, oh, this is juicy. What are we going to do about that? How do you think? Okay, let's get curious. Like, do we use the lightsaber? Do we use the laser gun? And if you can do that with business too, then I think this whole world of opportunity opens in front of you, where you become the wizard behind the curtain. And you realize, oh man, actually any game you want to play, there's rules, then there's ways to break those rules, then there's trends, then there's ripples, then there's rhythms. And so as soon as you realize that, you can have fun with it. I mean, we were talking beforehand about YouTube, and I have so much fun with social media online because it is a giant game. It's hyper algorithmic. There are tons of rhythms to learn and watch from other people. There's a feedback loop that tells you if you are succeeding or not almost immediately. And that is just like business. So if you like playing around with social media and learning which posts go viral because of the human attention span, then you might actually like business too. And that's why sometimes people are like, you know, well, I want to be a influencer online, or I want to be a singer or an artist. It's like, I don't know. Is that actually what you want? Do you want that label? Or do you want to play a game in which you have some skill set that maybe you could uniquely apply in order to win a little bit more than you lose? And
They do want the label.
I know, but I don't
That's
think
the
they're
problem.
happy once they get it.
They're not, because they didn't earn it. But and this is where I really want to get into the way the world actually works. So this is all psychology, yours and others. And the reality is people do want fame for nothing. They do want money for nothing. Now, what they don't understand, going back to money, is just a great facilitator. So if you don't know what you want to do, it's going to implode you. No one will believe you until they do it themselves. But that really is true. And so the question is, how do we get people to understand that, in fact, you've said this, the happiness is struggle. And once you understand, the way that I come at it is from an evolutionary lens. So over millions of years of evolution, nature realized that it had to put algorithms in your mind. One of those algorithms is you won't enjoy anything if you don't work hard for it. Period. Because nature had to make sure you were willing to face a saber-toothed tiger, go hunt, go gather, like every day in an unrelenting parade of difficulty and misery. You had to keep going. And so there had to be a tremendous reward for I just worked hard. And this is why no one once ever said, I worked my ass off to get this thing and I'm so sad I did it, right? It's like, I worked my ass off to get a thing I care about. That is important. Codie Sanchez says, be careful of the mountain you choose to climb, which I think is very wise. But if you worked your ass off to get something you care about, then you feel good, not just about the thing, you feel good about yourself. But there's a reason that rich kids implode, because when you get that thing, it's not going to hold the emotional weight that you wanted it to. And so the thing I fear with kids is, when I got into business, I didn't do it so I could get on the gram. The gram didn't exist. So I spent almost 20 years just building businesses, not thinking one day people will think I'm cool for this. I was doing it just so that I could launch my studio. That was it, man. I fucking ground myself into the dirt in order to be able to do it. And it was only, I was already worth hundreds of millions of dollars before I picked up my first social post. And if I could get people to fall in love with go get good, that will feel way better than all the likes that you could ever get, all the followers and all of that. That shit is transient. But being good at something is forever.
When you get rich and or famous, you start to get around other people that are rich and famous. What's interesting then is they can see who's real and who's not. Like this. And you start to crave actually the respect of people that you respect. And so I've seen it implode real fast because, you know, I have a friend, and he's young and he's done well, made a couple, let's call it tens of millions of dollars online now, but he's done it in ways that people just don't kind of want to associate with it. And so it's this empty thing. You have to pretend to a legion of humans listening to you that you're the real deal. And yet at the same time, you can feel it. And so, you know, I've talked to him about it a decent amount. And I'm like, man, you've got the thing. You're just chasing the wrong rabbit. And so you've got to find your actual real rabbit, because you're never going to have the respect just from the likes and clicks. And you'll get it once you're around a bunch of humans who are like, oh, he's a builder. Oh, he's got interesting ideas. No, he's not a hustler, because that's not really what the people that you want respect from are interested in. It's like, no, he's a creator. And by that, I mean a creator of value in this world. And most people don't know to strive for that. They think that we walk around comparing our bank accounts. Like, no, but did you see this? I'm real. It's like, no, I have no idea what's in your bank. I have no idea. And also, if I told you or you told me, we wouldn't, what does that mean? Nothing. You can't talk about that over a dinner table. You talk about what ideas are in your head and things are you building that are worthwhile for us to have a conversation that doesn't feel like we're at the shallow end. And at a certain point, that's where you want to go when you've had some success. And so, you know, Lisa and I were talking about how do you network with cool people? It's like, be cool, dude. And I don't mean like outfit cool. I mean, try to do cool or inspiring or things that bridge your curiosity. Because when you do that, eventually you just attract other people who are interested and trying too. And that, I think, is the real joy of what we get to do. Is like, I don't really care about, I mean, you've been in this game for a long time. I've met a lot of famous people and a lot of people on the interwebs. I'm like, oh, I could do without that. Never mind, not what I thought. And then you meet some builders and you're like, this guy scrubs his, one of my CEOs scrubs his name off of the internet. You can't find it anywhere. He's definitely, I mean, he's never told me or showed me his bank account, but a billions. And you couldn't find his name anywhere. And he is one of the most interesting humans to talk to because it is a one-of-one conversation and none of it is regurgitation. And so I think it's important that people are on the internet like you because otherwise you have a lot of humans who only do chase fame. And that's not, the universe abhors a vacuum. So they're going to fill it with more Kardashians or they're going to fill it with builders. And actually no hate to them because they're builders now too, but maybe not the world that I want to see exactly.
Right. I get that. I'm a little obsessed with Kim Kardashian. I'm not going to lie. And when she lit the internet on fire by saying maybe you just need to work harder, I was like, yes, motherfucker. People need to work harder. I could not believe that that was controversial. I
agree with that statement.
I stand in solidarity with Kim
the Kardashians.
With Kim. I don't know the rest well enough, but I will say that yes, it is what she has built is very impressive.
I agree with that.
How are we all supposed to feel that it started from a sex tape? I don't know.
I actually don't care about that. I think like that sucks that somebody did that to her or that it got out. I don't know. That's like, I don't care. I'm not a Puritan. I think I'm more just like, oh, do I really think, and I use it, so what the fuck, you know, do I think we need more makeup brands or more like clothing brands everywhere?
Interesting. To me, that's a brand play. And so that's all psychology, which I'm all for. I don't have any beef with that. And I really don't have beef with social media and leveraging that.
Yeah.
There is something at the edges. I've not taken the time to dive into this, so I'm really sort of spouting off right now.
Yeah. I think that's probably good.
But that I haven't thought about.
Yeah, this
well,
isn't at the
I don't
top
know.
of your
Like
to-do list.
she did a friend of mine, Matt Higgins, does a class at Harvard Business School every year.
Oh, yeah.
And he invited her in to be a case study. And I actually thought that makes a lot of sense to me.
Dude, me too.
So in the modern era, but I get it. There's something at the edges that
Well, and maybe not even that. I think it's cool that humans are building in public. And I think anytime you have people that have built multiple billion-dollar businesses, not to mention just $1 billion business, there is something to learn there. And you're crazy to be a moral absolutist and say, I got nothing to learn because it started from a sex tape. Correct. How many sex tapes are out there? And they're not billionaires. Yeah. So there's fucking something to learn there. So I would take a master class from her and her larger bank account any day. But I do think what I would like to see a little bit more of are like more people like you, more people like, Andy Frisella, more people like, that are building something that I think is super America focused, that I think has like the mission and values. I'm more of a mission and values sort of human in this world today.
That's interesting. That is almost certainly the thing that bothers me. I don't know that there's a mission. I don't know. I have not looked, but it does not radiate out from what they create. Thank you for putting your finger on what bothers me. Yeah, that's very interesting. We are living in a time where I think I would never have been an entrepreneur in any other era because for me, the only thing that allows me to work this hard is I have to hold a small group of people that I actually know and love and show up every day fighting for them. So at Quest, it was fighting for my mom and my sister. They were morbidly obese. I wanted to make food that they could choose based on taste. And it happened to be good for them. And so I was willing to fight for that. I was willing to make choices that cost me hundreds of millions of dollars in order to this is either going to help them or it's not. This decision makes me more money. This decision actually helps them. And so I was really proud of that. With Impact Theory, it is, again, a very small group of people. And unfortunately, I've been to one of their funerals already, and that's fucking heartbreaking. But just the changes he made in his life before, just car accident, just fucking dumb. Oh. But watching him change his life was unbelievable. And it was just an incredible reminder of how this stuff really works. But when you have that mission, that leaks out hopefully through the choices that you make, the products that you build, and that we're living in an era where that's also great marketing.
Yeah. It's hard to beat obsession. You know, you can have all the tactics and tools and money and leg up, but if somebody is obsessed with the thing they're spending every day building, they're hard to beat because they'll just work longer, they'll sacrifice more, and I do think that your success level often is tied to the sacrifice that you're willing to give. It doesn't mean you have to work 100 hours a week, but it does mean you need to sacrifice a lot if you want to achieve massive success. And I think anybody who says you don't probably has never played the game.
No, there's no way.
Yeah.
There is no way.
Yeah.
Everyone has to fight against entropy.
Yeah.
And so I won't say that nobody ever got, didn't get lucky. Of course, some people have gotten lucky, but that's just going to be such a minor thing. But the thing that's fascinating sitting down across from you, who is a fellow builder, is that you actually know how to do this. So what I want to do now is go, okay, look, we've talked mindset. Hopefully people understand that money isn't what you thought. It's actually more powerful, but it's different. Yeah. You really can do this. It really is about pulling back the curtain. It's about understanding psychology, knowing how the world works, understanding how to insert yourself into it. But to do that, for anybody at home that's like, okay, I want to do this, but now let's get into the real tactics. So that obsession becomes a set of skills. It really is that simple. And how do people, I think it's really twofold. One, how do they know which mountain to climb? It might be worth telling that oh so wonderful story. Yeah. And then once they know what mountain to climb, let's really get into the how doth one climb a business mountain. Yeah.
Well, I think we all missed the class in high school where they taught us to know thyself, Oracle at Delphi style. But I do think
nice reference. By the way.
That was good. Was that good. Highbrow?
Very elite of you.
Ryan Holiday would be proud. I feel like that was very stoic of me.
He's already leaving a comment in the feed. I can feel it.
So I think, if I could have gone back and done something different that would have gotten me out of working in corporate jobs that I didn't really like for like 12 years, even though I was stacking cash as I was doing it, what would have changed that for me would have been if I had thought more about who am I and what do I want? And so if anybody listening hasn't actually written down consistently, I did it daily, you can do it weekly, monthly, but what are the things that I like doing every single day? What am I actually uniquely skilled at? What do people come to me for advice on? What do I do and focus on even when I've never paid $1 and nobody's watching?
That one's big.
What are the things that I find so interesting that I become obsessed with them? And it's like they talk about that flow state. The whole world just goes whoom, and you're narrowed in. And maybe even your family's annoyed because you won't shut up about this one thing that you're doing all the time, right? Where can you find those things? And as you narrow in as those, they don't have to become, I think a lot of people then go video games. It's like, no, be more granular than that. Is it, wow, I get obsessed with the characters, or I really like thinking about the technology on it, or I kind of understand how this video game grew this much. Try to get really granular. And I wish I had done that earlier, because then I could have found games that I actually wanted to play. I was too scared that I didn't have some big startup idea like yours. I didn't have any ideas. I was like, I want to work hard. I want to make money. I want to do what I like to do.
Can we pause on that for a second?
Yeah.
So one thing I heard you say in another interview, and I was like, oh my God, know thyself, as you said. You said, I'm never going to have the next idea about a music app or whatever. That's just not me. And I was like, whoa, because people want to be cool. They want to be the person with the big ideas. Everybody thinks they want to be the CEO, but not everybody's wired for that. Yeah. And then even if they are, they may not be a product-led CEO. Maybe they're a people-led CEO or a process CEO, whatever. But not everybody has to be in that same thing. But once you own, okay, that's not me. Now you can start narrowing your focus to what your strategy is going to be. And that's the cool thing about you, is that you really have taken a super unique path to generating, I repeat, just under $100 million a year. That's bananas. So the fact that you were able to do that in a unique path, but it's born out of finally going, oh, I'm just going to be honest about who I really am and what I actually respond to. The question I tell people to ask themselves along those lines is, when you're trying to figure out what it is that you want to do, first of all, who is it you want to serve? Mm-hmm. Because you'll never fight hard enough unless you're serving somebody. Yep. But what is the thing that you're prepared to become the best in the world at? Because if you're just prepared to get good, you'll get crushed. And look, you're probably never going to actually become the best, but when you think about that, you know that's going to be ungodly difficult. And then at least you're approaching the problem honestly.
Yeah. Well, actually, my husband has us do this incredible thing that I love, which is instead of saying, what do I want? What are my goals? It's what do I want and what am I willing to sacrifice to get it?
Preach.
And so he has me do this with him every year because I'm the workaholic. He's actually balanced.
Really?
Yeah, I know. Which is, to say that about a Navy SEAL feels like off.
I was going to say.
It's like, now you know how fucked up I am. But, he is not singularly driven by money and the creation of an empire. And I am.
Interesting.
And I'm not driven by money in my pocket because I basically deploy all of it.
I was going to say,
usually.
for anybody that's looked into your background, that is very clear.
Yeah. But I just find it fascinating. I want to just build this huge thing. I want the $1 billion business.
It's control.
Yeah, it must be. And I also just think it's fun. It's my favorite thing. If I have to talk about the weather or PTA meetings, I'm going to just...
Now, are you like the Oracle of Omaha, where it's like literally just a scoreboard thing?
No, I think I will get to a certain point where there'll be a new game. Like we've talked about this before, he has singular focus for decades. I mean, I told this story on Twitter once, but I sat next to this guy on a plane. I actually think if you have enough cash to do it, first class, even today where everybody's posting about their private jets or whatever, first class today is one of the best investments you can make if you sit and talk with some of the other people in first class, except not me, because I hate talking to people on planes.
I was going to say facts. If you see me,
facts. Yeah,
you can say hi. That's lovely, but I don't want to talk the whole flight.
But what's fascinating is if you get to the generation above ours, so let's call it 50, 60, 70, 80. I was flying back from somewhere in France, must have been Cannes or Nice, and I was flying to the UK. And I sat next to this guy, Geoffrey Kent, who created Abercrombie & Kent. You remember that company?
I don't.
Luxury travel company. First company that created those safari tent experience. Very right.
Nice.
He grew up with nothing in South Africa, built up these safari tent companies by himself, then created one of the largest luxury travel companies in the world. Friends with the King of England now, like fancy, billions, billionaire. And anyway, he was flying next to me, which I thought was kind of interesting. I was like, like thought he'd be on a jet. And he's like, I like to fly commercial. I'm like, all right. We get to talking and I'm like, all right, you ran Abercrombie & Kent. You sold it twice, once for $1 billion and then going to sell it again and probably for another X and bought it back. I'm like, what was the secret?
There.
Yeah, he's fascinating. I was like, what do you think the secret is? Like you did this for 60 years, like billions in valuation. And he's like, 60 years plus the same thing. It's like time plus consistency beats everything else. And I was like, God, that's so true and not what people want to hear. Because most people hear, oh, you could be a billionaire at 97 years old like Warren Buffett. No thanks. I'd rather have my crypto millions today. And
they think.
But I sit there and listen to that and I'm like, this is fascinating. Like, what if the only thing that separates a billionaire and you is time of working really hard on a particular thing, plus consistency of doing that thing and getting better and iterating every single day. That means that we have a much more even playing field than I think people will tell you today.
It compounds. There's no doubt. We were talking before we started rolling. This is my mental illness. I really have a very hard time narrowing my focus. Yeah. And I am so keenly aware that narrowing my focus will give me better results. But the problem is I'm also a human, and so I have to love my life. Yeah. And so when I'm very envious of people like my wife, for whom the thing she wants to spend her time doing and becoming the best at, she loves from top to bottom. Yeah. And so she's just all about it. Thankfully, it's not like I have 7 things that I'm trying to do, but I have 2, and I cannot seem to stop myself. They're tied, but there is a big enough gap that I'm well aware. If I would just do like media, be in front of the camera, or I would just do storytelling, game development, my life would be better. It would be more productive in either direction. And only mental illness stops me from doing that. And I mean that very sincerely. I'm not happy about that. But at least know thyself. I know that about myself. We do things in the company to protect us from that.
Do you think why do you think that that's bad? Like Warren Buffett has multiple things and is one of the richest men in the world.
Does he? because he, as far as I know, and I may just not know, but as far as I know, he is purely investing. He finds if you abstract out to what he understands how to do is recognize a deal when he sees it. That's it. As far as I can tell, that's all Warren Buffett knows how to do.
That plus operate.
I don't know. I don't know him well enough to know if he operates.
Maybe
From
you
what
just
I
need
heard,
a Charlie Munger.
He doesn't operate.
Like, did you ever hear the Charlie Munger quote that's, he said, it might not have been Charlie, it might have been his mentor. He said, the difference between good leaders and bad leaders is when I hire a dog, I don't do the barking for it. And
wow, that's good.
And I thought that has really driven a lot of my business building is realizing I'm like you. I'm in some ways, I like hands in pots, which is not very good for focus. But what I found is that there are a lot of people who are singular focus individuals who do incredibly well with one thing in front of them. And so those end up being my number twos. And, you've built massive wealth, so you're obviously very good at focus too. But sometimes I wonder, is there just one way? I mean, maybe there is a main thing and a side piece.
I really think there are physics.
Yeah.
I think that whoever you point to, oh God, I'm going to ruin my own example here because I was going to say, except for Elon Musk, it's freakish. But so here's
Bezos,
what I think.
Blue Origin?
Yes, but the vast majority of his career was just focused on Amazon. It wasn't until he started really starting to pull away, and he had so many of the world's most talented people working for him. And my problem isn't putting my hand in too many pots because I don't want to do people's jobs. I am not a micromanager. As I tell people, if I'm micromanaging you, it's because you're not delivering results. I don't want to pay attention to you. What I want to do is the part I like, the part that I'm uniquely good at. That's all I want to focus at. And if I'm getting results in other areas, amazing. The problem is when you're the CEO, you have a bigger responsibility. You have to paint vision. You have to keep people excited. Anyway, I have a feeling that even Elon Musk, there might be networking things that work for him, but I have a feeling each one of his companies would be better off if he gave it 100% of his time and focus. It's just that he is such a freak, and the rate at which he can think, and also of his own admission, he's not the CEO of many of his companies. He's usually the lead product and engineer guy. And so his mind just seems to work very, very fast. So there's some level of what's the speed at which you think and how many tasks do you take on. So for instance, if I could think faster, which would not be a stretch, I am not a fast thinker. I'm a fast talker who thinks slowly and deeply about a lot of subjects. And so I confuse people who think I'm a fast thinker, but I'm not. So if I could think faster, then I could have more output across more things, but I can't. And so alas. It really is holding us back. So anyway, getting into the tactical side here. So you need to know yourself. You need to know what your skill set is. You need to be very careful not to misalign your particular skill set with the way that you contribute. But the cool thing when you realized, okay, I'm not going to come up with the next business idea. I'm going to go buy a business. How did you begin to build a criteria? Because you have so many specific criteria from your get-rich tripod to your deal valuations have to meet certain criteria. You've really systematized this stuff. How did you, in the beginning, when you didn't have any of that, how did you begin to formulate it?
I have a very bad memory. And so
you and me both.
So one of the worst things about a bad memory is you can't remember things. One of the best things is you have to processize everything, and that frameworks and memes or specific vernacular actually help you remember. And so the reason that I have the Get Rich tripod and, my deal box and, our rules and thesis for investing is because I have to remember. Otherwise I do bad deals. And so I think one of the superpowers you can have is as you're going on your journey, what I had to do, I didn't mean to do it, was document these frames that I lived by. Because one, when you're in charge, you got to communicate it to people. So I would go, hey, what kind of businesses do we buy? And they'd say BRT, right? We buy boring businesses that are recession resistant. We raise the prices. We add technology. Is the business that you're putting in front of me a BRRT business? No, it's not. Okay, go find another one. And so I would use it to communicate to people and to really communicate with myself, which is half the shit on my Twitter is like yelling at Codie. Probably, I don't know if you're the same, but
Exactly the same.
Yeah.
Like when people are like, oh man, like you're being so hard on people. I'm like, bro, I am talking to myself.
it's a reminder. At some point, I'll have to just be like lessons to Codie, and it'll just be my Twitter feed. But I like to framework them out for that reason. And the way that you do that is just by taking inventory. I make so many mistakes all the time. Even like 15, 16 years into doing deals, I just had a deal go bad last month. And I'm like, God, you'd think I'd figure this out by now. And every time that happens, I have a post-op. So just like after you have surgery or after you have a game, you sit down and you analyze what went well and what went wrong. We do that for every single deal we do that goes sideways.
Do you have a structure for that? Are you
Yes.
running them against the BRRT or?
We run them against our entire investing framework. So we usually have something called due diligence questions. So it's called a DDQ. And we build out our DDQ list is now gigantic and it's graded. So like what's most important to what's least important. And then we look at these deals and we say, what did we learn? And so in this most recent deal, I realized, gosh, I have a flaw with partners. I pick bad partners if these characteristics are there. If they're friends of mine already, I let them in and I skip a bunch of stuff in the DDQ. Yeah. So now I go, oh, okay, now I have a new rule. And the rule is no new friends. I don't do deals with new people until we've been together for a long time. Otherwise, they go to this other person on my team and they run them through the typical due diligence because I have a weak spot there. And so everything that I'm doing, it's just like, when you play a sport, or when you do a video game, like you go through and you're like, what went wrong there? Oh, I can't step out here because then the car hits me. Or like I can't go out to the left because that means the guy's going to get there. He's faster than I am. And I think we don't do that enough in business. So I am nonstop action, analyze, document. And as long as you do that AAD, then I find that I can kind of continuously make better decisions.
If you like this conversation, check out this episode to learn more.
There's people who are really rich who wake up really late and work really late. And there's people really rich who wake up really, really early. And there's people who are really rich who eat really healthy. And there's people really rich who drink Coca-Cola and eat French fries every day. And so there's all these things that we want to make as truth.